Chapter 2494 Breaking Free. Chapter 2494 Breaking Free. In your dreams! Heavenborn roared as he suddenly charged over again. Raging flames surged and golden blades danced. He managed to block everyone, yet a twisted expression spread across his face again. Fuck off! Fuck off! Fuck off! He roared. After screaming, his expression became even more twisted. He bent down and clasped his head in his hands, unable to stop himself from wailing in agony. Hurry! Ling Han immediately shouted to the Empress and the others. You! The three women were all looking at him. I'll definitely survive, Ling Han said with a solemn nod. The three women didn't say anything else, and they all sprinted toward the transference portal. Moreover, they weren't the only ones. Seizing this opportunity, the surviving celestial kings all dashed toward the transference portal as if their lives depended on it. Meanwhile, the celestial kings from the celestial path all sprinted as far away as they could. They couldn't leave the celestial path, so they could naturally only choose to retreat. Stop right there! Heavenborn screamed, with flames shooting from his eyes and slashing at the transference portal. A devastating sword chi swept over, slashing even third heaven celestial kings into two. However, Ling Han was already prepared for this, and he swung his divine demon sword to parry. Pun! He was instantly sent stumbling back by the powerful sword chi, vomiting blood as he did so. Right now, Heavenborn's battle prowess had already soared to the fourth heaven. He was profoundly powerful. Many more people leaped into the transference portal. At this moment, Heavenborn was completely unable to stop them. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! You're already dead, so why are you still disturbing me? Heavenborn bellowed in fury. His right hand continued to shift shapes, transforming into a saber, a sword, and sometimes a staff. Ling Han was already about to leave, yet he involuntarily faltered upon seeing this. Why was Heavenborn suddenly acting like he had an epileptic attack? Was this because the karmic life Heavenly Venerable was affecting him? This indeed made sense. The karmic life Heavenly Venerable had already passed away and fused together with Tao, allowing Heavenborn to comprehend all of his skills. Even the Black Tower was more attached to him than Ling Han. At the same time, however, a portion of the karmic life Heavenly Venerables would also exist within him as a result. It was just that Heavenborns enjoyed the dominant position. The karmic life Heavenly Venerables could only affect him a little. Even though this disturbance was only limited, during critical times such as this, it could definitely become a deciding factor. Master is indeed the best. He's saved me from another difficult situation. Suppress! Heavenborn roared. Not only did flames shoot from his body, but there were even arcs of lightning crackling in his eyes. His expression rapidly calmed down, and it was clear that the karmic life Heavenly Venerables was about to be suppressed by him. Ling Han didn't hesitate any longer, leaping into the transference portal. Whoosh! A burst of sword chi slashed over, as vicious as could be. Without even turning his head, Ling Han immediately parried with his sword. Pun! He couldn't help but shudder, and his body was crooked as he crashed through the transference portal. The scenes before him instantly changed. This was a dark spatial passageway. When he looked behind him, the transference portal had already transformed into a small white speck. However, he quickly saw Heavenborn charging over. He continued to pursue Ling Han in the passageway, and it was as if he were intent on killing Ling Han. Fuck! Ling Han hurriedly spread his legs and sprinted as fast as he could. Inside this spatial passageway, he didn't dare to activate the regulations to perform teleportation or time acceleration. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would disturb the flow of space and destroy this spatial passageway. You can't escape! Heavenborn shouted. His speed was astonishing. He hadn't used the power of regulations either, and he was simply relying on the might of his body arts. He drew closer and closer to Ling Han. With his immense speed, it was very likely that he would catch up to Ling Han in just a few seconds. Meanwhile, the Empress and the others were only slightly ahead of Ling Han. Ling Han steeled his heart and instantly stopped in his tracks, swinging his divine demon sword. Boom! Regulations burst from his body. Since Heavenborn insisted, he would destroy this spatial passageway. You dare? Heavenborn roared as he reached Ling Han. He swung his blade at Ling Han. Ling Han retreated, continuing to attack as he did so. However, his target wasn't Heavenborn. Instead, it was the passageway. Right now, his battle prowess was at the peak stage of the third heaven, so just how devastating was his destructive ability? It wasn't long before the entire passageway started to shake, with beams of peculiar light shining down. It was as if the passageway were about to shatter. Stop at once! Heavenborn bellowed in wild rage. Even though he had been nurtured and born by heaven and earth, gifting him with all kinds of peculiar abilities, he would also have no choice but to be washed away with the flow if this spatial passageway were truly to shatter. Of course, he definitely wouldn't die. With his divine metal body, perhaps only heavenly venerates and ninth heaven celestial kings could suppress him. However, would Ling Han pay any heed to this? He hastened his attacks on the spatial passageway. Pun pun pun! The entire passageway radiated with a dazzling glow, suddenly exploding in a violent manner at some moment. Ling Han was predictably sent flying. In fact, even his powerful physique and defenses were of little help, and he felt as if his bones had all been crushed into pieces. Shards of the great Tao more so pierced into his body, making him feel as terrible as could be. Fortunately, Heavenborn was also sent flying. Moreover, he was sent flying in the opposite direction. In the face of such a powerful explosion, even Heavenborn was unable to resist, having no option but to be sent flying. The explosions continued, emanating across the two directions. At this moment, Ling Han could only pray in his mind, hoping that the Empress and the others had managed to escape from the spatial passageway in time. Otherwise, they would definitely be severely wounded by the explosions, if not killed. His vision then darkened as he drifted out of consciousness. His wounds were far too severe. His chest had been torn apart by a heavenly venerate tool, and he had also suffered many gashes at the hands of Heavenborn's celestial tool blades. He had more so been wounded by the gigantic explosion of the spatial passageway. Even a person forged from metal wouldn't be able to withstand so many severe wounds. After heaven knew how long, he finally regained consciousness. An indescribable pain washed over him, and he was completely unable to open his eyes. He attempted to activate his divine sense, yet he was only able to use a wisp of it after exerting all of his energy. He examined his body, and he involuntarily let out a bitter chuckle in his mind. Very well, huh? This body is truly riddled with gaping wounds. He had already suffered severe wounds in the first place, and the shock wave from the gigantic explosion of the spatial passageway had been even more brutal. Right now, countless shards of the great Tao of space were embedded inside him. This was much like a mortal human being stabbed full of blades. Was this much different from dying? Fortunately, Ling Han was no ordinary mortal. Even if I want to move a little, I'll need to wait for at least 100 years, Ling Han thought to himself. In fact, even after 100 years, he would only recover a sliver of his battle prowess. He was still far, far away from making a full recovery. Moreover, he involuntarily sighed. His spatial god tool had also been shattered into pieces during that gigantic explosion, destroying everything inside it. Right now, I can only rely on myself to recover. Ling Han wanted to know where he was, yet he was unable to open his eyes and also unable to release his divine sense. He was completely blind at this moment. He sighed in his mind again. As a mighty celestial king who possessed a battle prowess at the third heaven, what could he do now? He was even weaker than an ordinary mortal. He could only remain lying there. In any case, his physique was already at the celestial king tier, so the natural elements obviously wouldn't affect him. 1 day, 10 days, 15 days. Time silently crept by. Ling Han tried his best to remove the shards of the great Tao from his body, yet his progress was as slow as could be. However, this was inevitable. His wounds were truly far too severe. He could only take things slowly. There were wild beasts here, and Ling Han was more so in an extremely frail state at this moment. He didn't possess the might or threatening aura of a celestial king, so he was also unable to frighten them away. From time to time, some wild beasts would wander over to bite him. However, his physique was thankfully powerful enough, so the wild beasts were unable to consume him even though he was already riddled with severe wounds. In fact, the wild beasts that bit him would all have their teeth shattered by his powerful physique. After more than 6 months, he was finally discovered by someone else. Chapter 2495 Difficult Process of Treating Wounds. Chapter 2495 Difficult Process of Treating Wounds. Young miss, there's a person lying here, a woman said. After a while, he heard the other woman reply. Pick him up and carry him back to the clan. But young miss, his background is unclear, and he's also riddled with severe wounds. It's extremely likely that he offended someone and was hunted down by them, forcing him to flee here. If we're somehow dragged into this matter, the first woman said. The young miss was clearly unhappy hearing this, and she said in a serious tone. Luhi, what do I always tell you? Oh, one has to have a kind heart, and always extend a helping hand when possible, the first woman replied. However, her voice was much softer, and it was clear that she was feeling slightly down after the criticism. Then what are you still waiting for? The young miss said. Ling Han immediately felt someone lifting him up. However, the maidservant instantly let out an astonished yelp. This was because she discovered that Ling Han's entire body was completely limp, with not a single bone intact. His wounds are actually this severe? The young miss exclaimed in astonishment. Young miss, to survive after suffering such severe wounds, this person is most likely very powerful. What if he's a bad person and turns on us after his wounds heal? The maidservant hurriedly said again. The young miss pondered for a moment before saying, If I leave him to die after already seeing him, my mind won't be able to rest easy. The maidservant was left with no option but to carry Ling Han away. Because Ling Han was now a sack of crushed bones and broken flesh, unable to exert any power, the maidservant could only rely on herself to pull Ling Han onto her back. Ling Han was unable to move, speak, or even open his eyes. He could only sense that he was brought into a room after several hours. A doctor then came to visit him, yet they immediately declared that he was dead. Young miss, his wounds are far too severe, so I'm afraid that he can't live for more than 3 days. Even if he's only got 3 days left, we still have to treat him to the best of our abilities, the young miss said. Ling Han felt someone setting his bones for him, yet this was naturally a futile struggle. If the shards of the great Tao weren't removed from his body, he would be nothing more than a complete cripple. What help could ordinary medicines be? Even ordinary celestial king tier medicines would be useless for him. He needed at least high-level celestial king tier medicines. Right now, Ling Han was trying his best to recover his grasp on the regulations of time. Even if he could only activate a sliver of this regulation, this would still speed up his recovery process by a significant amount. Then, like a rolling snowball gaining in size, his recovery would eventually become quicker and quicker. 3 days passed, and his situation remained the same as before. There was no improvement, yet he hadn't died either. Even the doctor was astounded. After re-examining Ling Han, he again reached the same conclusion. Young miss, he can't live for more than 3 days. 3 days later, Ling Han's situation remained the same. There was neither an improvement nor a deterioration. He hadn't died either. The young miss didn't call for the doctor again. Instead, she simply allowed Ling Han to lay in the room. In any case, her clan was large and wealthy, so it was no big task to nurture a sick person. Time flew by. 5 years passed, and the young miss had already married someone. However, she was the only successor of her clan, so it was instead her husband who moved in with her. Several years later, she gave birth to a son. Her son also grew up quickly, eventually becoming a father himself. Ling Han's situation still remained the same. However, if there were a celestial king here, they would discover that one of the shards of the great Tao inside Ling Han's body was starting to loosen. This seemed like minuscule progress. However, once this shard was removed, Ling Han would recover a sliver of his power, allowing him to accelerate time. Thereupon, his recovery would finally speed up. To Ling Han, several dozen years was no longer than the blink of an eye. Right now, he naturally knew that the young miss had only discovered him by chance after going out to hunt. This young miss was called Zhao Yulio, and her clan was located in a place called Vast Prosperous Town. However, Ling Han was unsure of where exactly this was located. After all, no one would go out of their way to speak to a dead person. He had only heard mentions of these matters from passers-by. More than 50 years later, the Zhao clan welcomed their fourth generation. This clan had few children, and Zhao Yulio didn't have any siblings either. Moreover, she had only given birth to a single son as well. Each generation only had a single successor. The fourth generation child of the Zhao clan was called Zhao Xin, and his name carried the meaning of passing down the flames of the Zhao clan and allowing it to flourish. He was only 3 years old at the moment, and he was truly as mischievous as could be. He always ran around the clan, and he didn't forget about Ling Han's room, either. However, he hadn't gone as far as to jump around on Ling Han's bed. Each time he entered, he would simply stare at Ling Han and babble whatever was on his mind. This became a habit of his, and each time he encountered something bad, he would run over to tell Ling Han all about it. This finally allowed Ling Han to learn more about Vast Prosperous Town. This place revered power, yet the average cultivation level of the people was quite low. For example, Zhao Yulio could already be regarded as an elite even though she was only at the 9th refinement of the body refining tier. In fact, she was already one of the top elites of Vast Prosperous Town. However, the later generations of the Zhao clan all lacked cultivation talent, with not a single person reaching the 5th refinement. If it weren't for Grandma Zhao holding on, it was very likely that the Zhao clan would rapidly lose its status. However, Zhao Yulio was already an old grandma over 80 years old, so it was hard to say how much longer she could hold on. Everyone in the Zhao clan felt like there were dark times ahead of them. Zhao Xin was also no good at cultivation. Everyone in his cultivation class had already reached the 1st refinement, yet he still continued to lag behind. If it weren't for the Zhao clan's power and influence, the cultivation school would have already expelled him long ago. Teaching him was a complete waste of time and effort. Zhao Xin genuinely belonged to the category of people who tried hard yet didn't get any returns. He was clearly putting in a lot of effort, yet his strength wouldn't go up no matter what. He treated Ling Han as someone to reveal his troubles to, and this was because only Ling Han would listen to him without laughing and without putting pressure on him. Ling Han allowed him to speak as he pleased. In the blink of an eye, Zhao Xin had already turned 15. On this day, he was once again humiliated in his cultivation class. A young girl whom he had loved for a long time played a mean trick on him, calling him into a small forest for a secret meeting. However, what greeted him were several other boys. Afterward, they gave him a violent pummeling. "Undying Grandpa, what did I do wrong?" They said, "I'm a toad who wants to marry a beautiful swan. Should I really quit the academy?" The young man was filled with pain as he asked these questions. At the same time, he was also hesitating about whether he should truly abandon cultivation to live an honest life as an ordinary person. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in his head. "If you abandon cultivation just like this, will you truly feel content? Who is it?" Zhao Xin exclaimed as he shot up in alarm. He looked all around him, yet he didn't see anyone at the door or the windows. He then looked back at Ling Han in astonishment, asking, "Undying Grandpa, was that you just then?" Ling Han sighed and said, "Yes, silly boy." After so many years, he could finally release a wisp of his divine sense. However, he could only use it for simple communication. He had stayed in the Zhao clan this entire time, so it could be said that they had helped him avoid the beatings of the elements. Thus, he was also willing to give Zhao Xin some guidance. "But your mouth didn't move," Zhao Xin exclaimed in astonishment. "Was this some kind of mystical power?" "Silly boy, if you want to become stronger, then shuffle over a bit." Ling Han said with his divine sense. Zhao Xian hesitated upon hearing this. Ling Han's appearance was truly a little frightening. He wouldn't suck his essential power dry to replenish his own energy, right? After pondering for a moment, he finally shuffled over. This was mainly because Ling Han was truly far too mysterious. Everyone thought he would die within 3 days, yet dozens of years had already passed, and his condition was still the same as before. Moreover, he didn't age either. Forget about it, he would give this a shot. Chapter 2496 Repaying Kindness. Chapter 2496 Repaying Kindness. Ling Han released his divine sense. At present, he really was extremely weak. Merely a sweep through Zhao Xian's body was enough to cause him extreme strain. However, he naturally could not ignore the kindness that he had been given. He was a celestial king, and even if he was injured, he was still a celestial king. He understood with a mere sweep. Zhao Xian's aptitude in cultivation was indeed very poor. He was definitely not a supreme extraordinary prodigy that had not been discovered. He truly was mediocre. Ling Han frowned internally. If he was still in his prime condition, changing Zhao Xian's aptitude would naturally be a piece of cake. Even if he could not turn him into a monarch star, becoming an ordinary prodigy was not the slightest bit difficult. Yet now, he really could only speak through divine sense. What was he to do? After some thinking, Ling Han finally came to a decision. He would design a cultivation technique for Zhao Xian personally, and improve his strength as much as possible. Zhao Xian, seeing Ling Han remaining silent for so long, could not help but ask, "Grandpa Immortal, if he kept straining his body like this, he would feel bad." Ling Han released his divine sense, allowing Zhao Xian to retreat. Then, he said, "I will teach you a cultivation technique. Memorize it." He spoke word after word, guiding Zhao Xian on how he should channel the power in his body, to strengthen his bones, flesh, and muscles. Zhao Xian hurriedly took note of it. He did not know who Ling Han was, but that was all right. Just given the fact that Ling Han looked to be on his deathbed but still lived for these few decades, without the slightest aging in his appearance at that, he knew that there had to be something amazing about Ling Han. After he had taught him the cultivation technique, Ling Han said, "You may go." He thought for a moment, and then said, "Do not let others know that I was the one who taught you." He still had to recover his injuries. If the members of Zhao clan found out, even if it was just to express their thanks, it would affect him. The reason why he had moved to help Zhao Xian was also because Ling Han knew that if Zhao Xian really did not amount to much, it really was possible that the Zhao clan would end in this generation. Ling Han was not a man that enjoyed owing debts. If the Zhao clan was really finished, whom would he repay the favor to? Zhao Xian agreed and left. Just over a dozen days later, he ran over in excitement, and exclaimed, "Grandpa Immortal, the cultivation technique you taught me is really useful. I have already reached the peak stage of the first layer of the body refining tier, and am soon about to break through the second layer." This was natural. Even if Zhao Xian was even more mediocre, Ling Han was a celestial king, and had even been the overlord of a realm before. How could the cultivation technique that he had created especially for the boy not be awesome? However, Ling Han sighed internally. This brat's natural talent was indeed extremely poor, or he should already have achieved the second layer of the body refining tier by now, or even charged to the third layer. Forget it, in any case, he had a lot of time, and Zhao Xian did not have too little time either. "Cultivate well." Ling Han only spoke these words. Having Ling Han as a cheat code, Zhao Xian's cultivation level naturally soared. Very soon, he was shining with brilliance, and became a prominent rising star in the martial hall. He had also become the most representative example of former trash that had staged a comeback. Who knew how many beautiful women admired him, and this also caused the young girl who had previously made fun of him to feel extreme regret. Zhao Xian's strength soon surpassed that of Zhao Yulio, and also made Zhao Yulio feel very gratified. Furthermore, the legend of this youth was still continuing. he broke through to the element-gathering tier within half a year's time, and he advanced into the gushing spring tier another year later at an astonishing speed. And from the information that Zhao Xin had told him, Ling Han was becoming more and more depressed. Where exactly was this place? Ling Han had considered all the places in both Eastern and Western celestial realms, yet could not match what Zhao Xin had told him with any of those places. Then, he came up with a deduction. It couldn't be that he had entered into a small world, right? This was very logical because those born in the celestial realm would already be in the shattering void tier or even stronger by birth. The majority would be able to cultivate to the Genesis tier, and this was also why the three great heavenly venerates had forbidden those from the ancient realm from entering into the celestial realm, because the more living beings there were, the stronger a realm would be. As for the ancient realm, it similarly had an overall level that was higher than a small world. Though it was not as freakish as the celestial realm, most people would have reached the spiritual ocean tier by birth. Thus, considering things from this angle, the possibility that this was a small world was extremely high. Moreover, the spiritual chi here was extremely scarce, which also matched the distinctive traits of a small world. The spatial passageway had crumbled, and Ling Han had actually arrived in a small world? No wonder the Black Tower and Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had appeared in the lower realm. After transmigrating through the void, they really would be scrambled all around the entire realm. Ling Han set this problem aside. Whether it was a small world or the ancient realm, once his injuries were recovered, returning to the celestial realm could be achieved at any moment. He continued to heal his injuries, and about 70 years passed. It seemed like something in his body had exploded. This was a shard of great Tao. Even if only a single shard had been removed, Ling Han felt his whole body grow lighter. He had finally recovered a slight bit of power. It really was just a slight bit. This progress was much faster than he had expected. He just barely managed to get to his feet, and felt his whole body sway unsteadily. Grandpa Immortal. Just coincidentally, Zhao Xin happened to come over. When he saw that Ling Han had actually stood up, he was so shocked that his eyes looked to be in danger of popping out. By now, he was already in his 30s, but he was completely focused on cultivation, and had not married yet. However, his intelligence was not like how it had been when he was younger. How could he not know that Ling Han was a supreme person of extraordinary talent? However, this amazing person had sustained severe injuries, and it was possible that he would never recover in this lifetime. Now that he suddenly saw Ling Han stand up, he was naturally dumbstruck. Ling Han smiled, yet felt an agonizing pain. No matter what actions he did now, he would feel overwhelming pain. Zhao Xin talked with Ling Han, relating his latest experiences to him, and what powerful rivals he had encountered, and just how many prodigies he had defeated. A thought came to Ling Han. Do you want to learn alchemy? Zhao Xin faltered for a moment, and then answered, yes. Thus, Ling Han began to teach Zhao Xin the art of alchemy. Unlike Ling Han's other disciples, it was much more arduous for Zhao Xin to practice alchemy because Ling Han was unable to teach him personally, and could only instruct him verbally, while Zhao Xin himself was mediocre, so understanding was extremely difficult for him. Thankfully, he was extremely resilient, and had a stubborn determination. He was willing to study, and could bear hardship. Thus, his progress in alchemy was actually not too bad, and this caused Ling Han some slight amount of surprise. After becoming an alchemist, Zhao Xion's progress through the cultivation levels became even faster. Furthermore, he had also concocted a considerable number of alchemical pills to extend the lifespan of Zhao Yulio and the others. It was only now that they discovered that Ling Han had actually revived, and they were all shocked. Zhao Yulio felt particularly rueful. She had not expected that the act of kindness that had been a mere whim would actually change the fate of the Zhao clan entirely off course. It was heading towards a better direction. However, in everyone's eyes, Ling Han was only a dying man. Though he could just barely walk now, his injuries were still extraordinarily heavy, and he could possibly die at any moment. Ling Han was recovering his injuries, while Zhao Xian was campaigning in all directions. 70 years later, he finally became a great elite of the spiritual ocean tier, and the members of the Zhao clan that were superior to him in cultivation level had more or less all passed on. It could not be helped. The effects of the alchemical pills he could concoct now were limited, and Ling Han had only removed 3 spikes of great Tao. He was far from being capable of using any mystical powers. Moreover, unless there was no other choice, he had no wish to interfere in the lives of mortals. Living long did not automatically mean happiness. It was already enough to be able to live one's lifetime well and peacefully. Zhao Xian continued his legend, but no one knew that there was an incredibly powerful celestial king standing behind Zhao Xian. Over 100 years later, Zhao Xian had married and had children of his own, having his own descendants. Chapter 2497 Zhao Xian opens the skies. Chapter 2497 Zhao Xian opens the skies. The Zhao clan was no longer the Zhao clan of days past. The present Zhao clan had now become one of the great clans of the Eternal Heartland, and their leader was a spiritual infant-tier elite. It was rare to find anyone to match him. Furthermore, Zhao Xian had also chosen another well-known mountain as residence, choosing a new location for Zhao clan. However, Ling Han did not go with him, but remained at the ancestral grounds of Zhao clan in Grand Prosperity Town. Indeed, the cultivation of this small world was not flourishing. A mere spiritual infant tier was capable of reigning supreme, and there weren't any elites of the deity transformation tier, heaven tier, or shattering void tier to be found at all. Ling Han investigated thoroughly, and it was not that this place could not produce any prodigies, or like with the lower realm, a force from the ancient realm would harvest them once every 10,000 years. It was just that this place did not have enough spiritual qi, so merely spiritual infant tier was considered the pinnacle. The fact that Zhao Xian could ascend to this cultivation level in a short 100-odd years was naturally because he was capable of alchemy, which compensated for the lack in spiritual qi. And precisely because of this, he could continue to improve his strength under such extremely harsh conditions. Furthermore, his speed of advancement was also astonishing. And at this time, Ling Han had finally recovered some vitality. Through some calculations, he would need another 300 years before he could recover enough of his strength to rip open the fragile seal over the heaven and earth of this small realm. He continued to rest and recover. In any case, he had already entered into the ancient realm, so he would not be able to return to the celestial realm yet for the time being. Thus, he might as well wait until he recovered his strength to the level of ascending origin tier or celestial king tier, and then seek out the Empress and the others. He was sure that with a supreme elite like Zhou Heng standing guard, Heavenborn would have no way to play any tricks either. At most, he would only become a first-tier heavenly venerate, and that was a matter of who knew how many years later. Ling Han kept a very low profile. In the entire Zhao clan, aside from Zhao Xian, only those that guarded the ancestral grounds knew of his existence. 200 years, 300 years. Time passed by in a flash. 300 years later, Zhao clan had already become a supreme overlord of the Eternal Heartland because Zhao Xian had already advanced into the Shattering Void tier. Next, he would be opening the skies so that the whole realm would rise into the ancient realm, and only that could fundamentally alter the environmental conditions of this small world. Ling Han naturally was completely unconcerned. When Zhao Xian especially brought this matter up to him for guidance, Ling Han only nodded calmly, and allowed him to make his own decisions. Zhao Xian had heard Ling Han talk of how there were many elites in the ancient realm. His strength, over there, was completely inadequate, and he could only become a subsidiary power of a strong force. There was a saying, "Better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven." He was enjoying a relaxed, free life here, so why should he go to the ancient realm to suffer? "Senior, I have still decided to open the skies," Zhao Xian said. He could not guess Ling Han's strength, and felt that while this great man was enshrouded in an air of death, with injuries so heavy that he could die at any moment, he was still not dying. Though Ling Han had never talked of his origins, Zhao Xin was sure that he came from the ancient realm, and had been forced into dire straits by his enemy's pursuit, and that was why he had fled into the small world to escape. Though that wasn't right, it was actually already very close to the truth. The only disparity was that Ling Han did not come from the ancient realm, but rather the celestial realm. Furthermore, he was already standing at the highest tiers of the celestial realm. Ling Han declined to comment. However, if Zhao Xin really opened the skies and went into the ancient realm, Ling Han would be willing to do some things. Protecting Zhao Xin was naturally no big deal. He also wanted to do something that he had wanted to do before, but hadn't gotten around to do yet. Reuniting the immortal realm and netherworld. With his present strength, if he used himself as a core, it was completely possible that he could unite the ancient realm as one in a short period of time. Of course, this short period of time was only in relative terms. It would possibly take a few thousand years. The members of Zhao clan had varying opinions about the matter of opening the sky. Some agreed, and thought that they would have better prospects only once they went into the ancient realm, but there were some that thought it would be better not to take the risk. How great was it to be overlords here? Even if their aptitude was slightly poor, and their strength was not that great, who would dare disrespect them outside? Yet, who could persuade Zhao Xin? After preparing for 100 years, Zhao Xin had also polished his cultivation of the Shattering Void tier to an incredibly sturdy level. There was really no further room for advancement. Finally, he opened the skies. His aptitude was not very good. Though he had cultivated the cultivation technique that Ling Han taught him, he could only just barely be considered a prodigy. This was a very arduous venture for him, and he almost failed. It was Ling Han who had lent him a helping hand at the final crucial moment, allowing him to narrowly attain success. A hole had been created in the ancient realm, and the eternal heartland rose through this hole, entering into a wider, more expansive world. After flying in the ancient realm for 3 days, the eternal heartland arrived at a planet. It landed and integrated with it. Breathing in the far more abundant spiritual chi, along with the fact that opening the sky was a great merit, the heaven and earth bestowed blessings that bathed all of them. Instantly, quite a number of people broke through on the spot. Long live! Long live! Long live! Countless people knelt down, extremely excited. Meanwhile, Ling Han experienced the blessings bestowed by the heaven and earth. For others, this was an indescribable benefit, but for him, it was not the slightest bit useful. He lay idly. Throughout these several centuries, he could already use the regulations of time. Though he could only channel a slight sliver, for the slight sliver of a celestial king to be in this ancient realm, what kind of concept was that? To remove the shards of great Tao in my body, there is no way without a few tens of thousands of years. Ling Han sighed. He had initially thought that it would only take several thousand years, so he was disappointed, of course. Furthermore, Zhou should have brought people to that transcendent dimension by now, right? Ling Han frowned. After so long of not returning, would they have thought that he had died alongside Heavenborn? He shook his head. There was no point thinking so far ahead now. He had best just focus on recovering his injuries first. Outside, Zhao Xin had successfully opened the skies, and led the great land to descend. This naturally drew the reactions of various forces of this planet immediately. They all sent out envoys, wanting to bring the eternal heartland under their authority. Looking at the many elites arriving through the air, Zhao Xion's expression became involuntarily grim. Previously, he had ruled supreme, and could find no one that could match him. But now, any elite was stronger than him, and he had a first-hand experience of just how serious the circumstances were. Become the subject of our fortunate horse nation, and your nation's security is assured. Humph, I have come as the representative of General Qi of the great youth nation. Who is the master of this nation? Come out immediately to greet me with respect. All the envoys introduced themselves respectively, and they were all extremely arrogant and overbearing. It couldn't be helped, for they all knew that the strongest in a world that had newly opened the skies and ascended could only be a shattering void tier, at most. What need was there for them to be wary? And all the cheers also ceased. Under the intimidating pressure of mountain river tier elites, everyone felt anxious, their hearts extremely heavy. This was suppression from a superior level. The mountain river tier was a height that only beings in the ancient realm could attain. Zhao Xian's expression was calm as the predictions that Ling Han had previously spoken to him about surged through his mind. He slowly said, "I am Zhao Xian, the master of the Eternal Heartland. However, as for whichever force we should align with, I cannot make the decision either. I have to first ask the opinion of a prominent lord." Huh! To say nothing of the fact that the various envoys were stunned, even those subjects were surprised. There was another lord. What lord? Wasn't Zhao Xian the strongest elite of the Eternal Heartland? All right, then let's go take a look. Haha, does he think he is all that, putting on such airs? Come, I would really like to show him what the cultivation level of mountain river tier is like. Who knows if this lord would die in fright? The envoys humphed coldly. They did not mind meeting this lord first and making fun of him before eliminating him. Come with me, Zhao Xian said. He led the way in front, bringing those envoys with him to the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan, and did not let any other people follow suit. Chapter 2498 Get over here and pay respects. Chapter 2498 Get over here and pay respects. The envoys were all acting casual. As they saw it, what elite could there be hidden in a small world that had just newly ascended? When they arrived, they would just slightly release the aura of the mountain river tier, and just see if that so-called lord wouldn't be scared completely witless and kneel and beg to be spared. Zhao Xian's imperial palace was not too far away from the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan, and added with how fast they were moving, they arrived at their destination in just over 2 hours' time, and this was still because Zhao Xian's speed was too slow. If they could all soar, they probably wouldn't even need an hour. Once they had arrived, Zhao Xian immediately became careful. Even if he had once been the ruler of a world, he couldn't help but think back to when he had been running around Ling Han when he had been little. With a few words, the other party had taught him a supreme cultivation technique, and that was what had allowed him to stand at the height he stood at today. To him, Ling Han was master, and was also a living masterpiece of cultivation that could not be studied. Seeing how Zhao Xian was behaving, all the envoys were extremely disdainful. Whom was he acting for? Did he think he could scare them just like this? Your Imperial Majesty! The people that were responsible for guarding the ancestral grounds approached, paying their respects to Zhao Xian. Zhao Xian waved a hand, signaling that they could rise, and then waved them off in dismissal. In front of mountain river tiers, numbers could not be any kind of advantage at all. It would only be a one-sided massacre. Zhao Xian strode forwards, and entered into the ancestral grounds. However, the envoys were not so well behaved. They all stood proudly in midair, and wanted to see what tricks Zhao Xian could have up his sleeve. Quickly, my time is precious! The envoy from Fortunate Horse Nation urged. Though the other envoys did not speak, impatience was clearly written on their faces. They had already played around long enough with this minor character. They really had no patience to continue these games any further. The ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan naturally wouldn't be too large. Very quickly, Zhao Xian arrived at the courtyard where Ling Han was resting. Pushing open the doors, he entered, and he saw Ling Han was presently sitting in a chair and sunbathing. Though close to 1,000 years had passed, Ling Han's appearance still hadn't changed. His whole body was covered with wounds, and bits of bone could be seen. "Milord!" Zhao Xian knelt on bent knee, greeting Ling Han. Ling Han had never said he would take him as a disciple, so he dared not consider himself as a disciple. Ling Han made no reply, as if he had died. Anyone who had sustained such serious injuries would definitely not be far from death, and could only linger with one last breath of life. "Haha, this is that lord!" The envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation looked down from above, and couldn't help but erupt into loud, mocking laughter. The other envoys were the same. What had they seen? A mere cripple, so injured that all the bones in his body had shattered. Even his skull had caved in, his features distorted. Was this even a human anymore? Old geezer, let me send you off on your way. The envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation was the wildest. He shot down from midair as he delivered a palm strike straight onto Ling Han's head. How dare you! Zhao Xin moved. Even if the gap in power was boundless, he could not help himself. Pang! His punch shot out, but the envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation suddenly stiffened, and received a direct hit from his punch. Immediately he stumbled backwards. And this was because the envoy from the Fortunate Horse Nation had advanced into the mountain river tier, and had also cultivated his physique to the shattering void tier. Otherwise his head would have been crushed into mush with this one punch. Even so, his nose had still caved in, one of his eyes slanted, with blood gushing. What in the world was going on? The other envoys also paled in shock. Though the cultivation level of the Fortunate Horse Nation envoy was not too high, in the ancient realm, a mountain river tier was enough of an elite that they could establish their own force. This was a line that separated mortals from gods. Zhao Xin had not crossed over this line at all, so how was it that he could injure a mountain river tier elite with a single punch? This was incredibly strange and uncanny. Involuntarily, a chill rose up their spines. Naturally, the more they didn't understand, the more they were anxious. Could it be that there really was a lord of astonishing strength? Zhao Xin was also stunned. That was because he had never known how strong Ling Han was, and only when this punch succeeded did his heart finally calm down. The strength of Ling Han was something he could not estimate. Chao Dong, what was that just now? One of them asked the Fortunate Horse Nation envoy. He was an envoy of the Right Minister of the Golden Leopard Nation, and the Golden Leopard Nation was a majestic empire, but the Fortunate Horse Nation was a royal empire. There was a clear hierarchical difference, and he had that amount of confidence to ask this question. Chao Dong rubbed the corner of his lips. This punch had really inflicted a lot of pain on him, but it did not cause him severe injury. He spat, produced a mouthful of blood, and then said, "It was like my body stopped for a moment, then I saw a fist coming my way. I could not move at all, and was unable to dodge." Something like that actually happened? The Golden Leopard Nation envoy frowned deeply. He descended from the air with wide steps, and stopped around 30 meters away from Ling Han. Clasping his fists, he said, "I am Hu Biao, a subordinate of Lord Yin, the Right Minister of the Golden Leopard Nation. Dare I ask how I may address you, sir?" He did not dare be careless. If it had really been Ling Han who had acted previously, his strength had to be world-shaking. Thus, he immediately revealed his origins as an intimidation tactic against Ling Han. However, Ling Han did not respond. The envoys were all embarrassed. What were they supposed to do now? Should they advance or retreat? If they retreated, that would be too cowardly. They had come aggressively, yet were to flee in such a sorry manner? Furthermore, how were they supposed to answer when they returned? If they said that they had encountered a powerful foe, who was that powerful enemy then? Was it really this person who was on his last breath? Or perhaps had already died even? But if they advanced, someone had already sustained a loss just now, and this filled all of them with extreme wariness. Who would dare make a move easily? Hence, they were stuck in a dilemma. Still, they couldn't just continue this stalemate, right? Hu Biao fixed his eyes on Ling Han. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that Ling Han was just a cripple that was so heavily injured that could no longer be treated. To say nothing of him, even a person who was just a slight bit stronger could come, and a single stomp would be enough to worsen the cripple's injuries, and cause his immediate death. Could this cripple really be an elite? Hu Biao did not believe it. This thought could not be dismissed. His malice fed his courage, and he couldn't help but take a step, walking towards Ling Han. Zhao Xin immediately went on guard. The other was a mountain river tier, whose strength had surpassed his who knew how many times over. Hu Biao did not come too close. He only took a few steps, and then made an aggressive move, shooting out a punch through the air at Ling Han. This was an escape path that he had left for himself. If Ling Han was just trash, then he naturally would be able to kill both Ling Han and Zhao Xian in a single stroke with the crushing power of Mountain River Tear. If not, he had also reserved enough of a safe distance for himself, and he could immediately turn around and flee. It was not a bad idea, but the problem here was that the person he was presently facing was a celestial king. The power of the punch made contact, yet it froze at a visible speed, and then reversed its course. It was like space had suddenly been turned around on its head. Ping! This punch was blasted backwards at an even faster speed than it had come. Hu Biao could not even block it completely when his face sustained a heavy punch, causing him so much pain that he hurriedly gripped his face, involuntarily tearing up in pain. Seeing this scene, all the Endas naturally had no more doubt. There was indeed a great elite on guard here with Zhao Xian, though it might not be that cripple. Let's go! They turned around and fled at the same time. This rock was too hard, and there was no way that they could move it an inch. But a spine-chilling scene took place. Though their legs were moving quickly, their bodies did not move the slightest bit. This was extremely bizarre. Yet Zhao Xian leaned towards Ling Han, as if he was listening to something. Not long after, a hint of surprise appeared in his expression. However, he still declared, "All of you, listen up. After you return, tell the masters of your nations to get over here and pay their respects." Chapter 2499 Recovered. Chapter 2499 Recovered. Demanding for the nation leaders to get over here and pay their respects? This was too arrogant. All the envoys were furious. They admitted that Zhao Xian indeed had an elite on his side, and they could not afford to trifle with him, but it should be known that there were heavenly body tier overlords here. What kind of concept was that? If they went into a rage, that would be enough power to destroy a whole planet. You actually dared to trifle with such an elite? Are you guys getting lost or not? Zhao Xian rebuked harshly. When these words fell, all the envoys suddenly realized that their mobility had recovered. Suddenly losing control, they immediately rushed out. They did not dare to stop. Zhao Xian's party being arrogant was their business, and the only thing they had to do was to relay the message. In any case, judging by the present situation, they could not afford to trifle with him, so they might as well not interfere. Everyone fled swiftly, and they all disappeared very quickly. "My lord, your body." Zhao Xian looked towards Ling Han. Throughout all these years, Ling Han's condition did not improve or worsen. Actually, it could not become any worse. His whole body was close to rotting completely, so how much worse could it get? Ling Han sent out a message through divine sense. "I'm fine." Only he himself knew that he had already removed 29 shards of Great Tao. However, the number of shards of Great Tao in his body numbered in the thousands, so the improvement in his condition was not very apparent. In the next few days, the Eternal Heartland was unusually peaceful, as if the sky had not been opened at all. It was still a small world, and Zhao Xian alone was enough to suppress all others in this world. But everyone knew that this was the final calm before the storm, and the peace would very soon be shattered. True enough, by the 7th day, various forces arrived in quick succession. There were great generals and there were also minor generals from various nations. The great generals had been sent by smaller nations, while the minor generals were sent from greater nations, and their cultivation levels were all at the Sun-Moon tier. Since Mountain River tiers could not deal with the problem, then they would deploy Sun-Moon tiers. Heavenly body tiers were too high and noble. How could they arrive with just a summons from Ling Han? Did he think that they were courtesans from the brothel? These elites were already terrifying enough. Without a heavenly body tier elite on guard, who could match their combined power? Thus, these people came grandly, all of them unleashing their auras without reservation. This was astonishingly frightening. Indeed, they had come to show off. The first batch of envoys had actually been frightened into fleeing in panic. No matter what, they naturally had to wash off this humiliation. They came aggressively, and went all the way to the imperial palace. Then, they began to reprove harshly, demanding that Zhao Xian come out to greet them. Going along with what Ling Han had previously said, Zhao Xin brought these people to the ancestral grounds again. Are you bringing us to worship your ancestors? The second batch of envoys already knew what kind of place this was, and their expressions were all livid. When they arrived, these Sun-Moon tier elites sneered. One of them moved, and struck out at these ancestral grounds. Instantly, the sun and moon revealed their brilliance simultaneously, dazzling light surging in all directions. It was like a sun and moon had fallen, dropping thunderously from the skies. This scene was a little astounding. In the celestial realm, a sun-moon tier was not worth much, but in the ancient realm, they could just manage to be ranked among elites. The might of their attack was frightening. Zhao Xin couldn't even move. Under the heavy pressure of sun-moon tier aura, it was already impressive enough that he could remain standing. Yet this strike did not manage to land. That sun and moon both stopped above the ancestral grounds. It was as if a sun and moon had appeared out of nowhere, illuminating the area brightly. All the envies felt their scalps go numb. This definitely was not something that a sun-moon tier could do. Could it be that there was actually a heavenly body tier elite standing behind Zhao Xin? Scram! A voice filled with authority rang out in their minds, causing their minds to suddenly go blank. Their only thought was to turn around and return. Only when they returned to their respective nations did they finally come back to their senses. Involuntarily, they couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, and almost passed out again. In the Eternal Heartland, Ling Han sent a message through divine sense to Zhao Xin. Prepare a carriage, and bring me around all these nations. Zhao Xin did not ask what Ling Han intended to do, nor did he dare to. He merely obeyed the command and did as required. He personally took the position of coachman, and began traveling to the nations one after another based on how far away they were. Every time they reached a nation, Ling Han would have him drive the carriage directly into the imperial palace. So what if there were people obstructing them? They could not even make a single move. Ling Han had an intimate conversation with every single nation leader, and the effects were naturally obvious. These nation leaders willingly chose Zhao Xin as their common leader. All the heavenly body tier elites listened obediently. They could sense an extremely terrifying aura from Ling Han, and thought that Ling Han was a Genesis tier overlord. After dealing with all these minor problems, Ling Han continued to recover. Occasionally, he would also guide Zhao Xin, and teach him new skills of alchemy. Time passed swiftly, and 30,000 years passed in a flash. Ling Han had finally expelled the last shard of great Tao from within his body. Immediately, a frightening power surged fiercely, and boundless light shone from the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan. In fact, even space itself had been ripped, and the celestial realm could just be seen vaguely. If he wanted to return to the celestial realm, he merely had to take a single step. Ling Han did not do this. He stood up, all the shattered bones in his body beginning to join back up again. Golden light filled the area, turning into one seal after another. Then, his flesh and skin recovered, and there was not the slightest sign of any wounds left. His injuries were very heavy, but they were mainly heavy due to the shards of great Tao. Now that the shards of great Tao had been removed, he could immediately heal his body. My grasp of the indestructible heaven scroll has actually increased a bit. Ling Han was surprised. These few tens of thousands of years, he had been battling with the shards of great Tao, and the conflict did not stop for an instant. The strongest weapon against the shards of great Tao was naturally the indestructible heaven scroll. It was being channeled at all times. The shards of great Tao were hard to get rid of, but it was also because of this that he had to find out the deepest, most profound secrets of the indestructible heaven scroll. Is this a blessing in disguise? Ling Han couldn't help but smile in spite of himself. The strength of his present physique had reached the height of the second heaven. Initially, it would have taken an ocean's worth of resources and an astounding amount of time to attain this level. And the shards of great Tao can be considered a type of energy as well, but this process. Just how many could bear it? Ling Han thought back to how he would be pierced by the shards of great Tao at all these times throughout these tens of thousands of years. That kind of agony caused him to involuntarily break out in a cold sweat. I definitely do not want a second experience, he thought. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Multiple figures shot forth. They were Zhao Xian and the other great nation leaders. Ling Han would teach Zhao Xian occasionally, and afterwards one of the nation leaders came as well. Seeing that Ling Han had actually not dismissed him, and he had really been taught, the other nation leaders naturally came too. In fact, they had all moved into the ancestral grounds of the Zhao clan. Though only a few tens of thousands of years had passed, Zhao Xian's cultivation level had already reached the heavenly body tier, and there were a few veteran heavenly body tiers that would have hopes of advancing to the eternal river tier. They were filled with incredible respect towards Ling Han. When they discovered that a sudden bizarre event had happened here, they naturally all came over to investigate. My lord! When they saw Ling Han, everyone was dumbfounded. Their impression of Ling Han was a dying man, but what about now? His build was lanky and tall, hair flowing straight to his waist, every single strand inky black and shimmering, as if they were forged from godly metal. His skin was radiant, as if he was great Tao itself. The mere sight of him made one want to bow down in worship. Congratulations on your recovery, my lord, Zhao Xian said immediately, his expression filled with pleasant surprise. He couldn't help but think back to his youth. Ling Han had always been severely injured, and he had finally recovered after several tens of thousands of years had passed, which made him feel rueful. Ha 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 ha, a peculiar light has appeared. Could it be that a precious treasure has appeared in this place? Amidst loud laughter, another person appeared in the courtyard. He was of sturdy, tall build, and exuded a frightening air of bloodshed. Chapter 2500 Merging Two Realms. Chapter 2500 Merging Two Realms. Who was this person? None of them recognized him, yet they felt a chill rise up from the bottoms of their hearts, because not one of them knew when exactly he had appeared among them. This person. Just how strong was he? The precious light is coming from you? This tall, sturdy man set his eyes on Ling Han, and then his gaze became harsh. Was it you that consumed the exceptional precious herb? What if I did, and what if I did not? Ling Han countered calmly. The other party's strength could not be hidden from him at all. This was a Genesis tier saint, and a great saint at that. But in his eyes, so what if he was a great saint? If you did, I will refine you into an alchemical pill, this great saint declared coldly. How dare you? Zhao Xian and the others shouted. En? The great saint glared at them, with a frightening aura spreading out, causing everyone to feel their hearts constrict, which was an indescribably terrible feeling. In front of me, what gives you people the right to speak? With a thought from him, over a dozen fists instantly rose up from the ground, barreling towards Zhao Xian and the others. As saint! Zhao Xian and the others said in shaking voices. With this attack, they could confirm who he was without a doubt. This was a saint, the strongest existence in the immortal realm, especially when a great event happened several tens of thousands of years ago. Countless saints had disappeared in unison, and there were only few that remained. Naturally, all of them were supreme beings. Pun 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 pun. These fists had not destroyed them when they were all turned back into dust. En? This great saint's eyes widened, and he finally looked serious. Who are you, sir? He discovered that Ling Han's cultivation level was in no way inferior to his own. Ling Han? Ling Han? This great saint murmured, his brows slightly furrowed. He thought that this name was a little familiar. He seemed to have heard it somewhere before. Kneel and apologize, and I will spare your life, Ling Han stated. If this had been several tens of thousands of years ago, and someone threatened to kill him, he would definitely have killed him instead. But because his body had just recovered, he was in a good mood. Thus, he was willing to give the other party a chance of survival. That great saint flew into a great rage. He was a saint, and someone actually dared to demand him to kneel. Did he have a screw loose in his head? He couldn't be bothered to think further about who Ling Han was. Instead, he moved directly. Hong, a palm struck out, and all the stars in the skies trembled. This was the might of a saint. Ling Han had massacred the immortal realm in the past, and a great number of saints had died. There were also many saints that he had brought with him into the celestial realm. There were only a few saints that were still present. Ling Han pretended he did not see anything. However, when the attack was just about to land on his head, it all stopped, and strangely floated in midair. This scene was very grand. Countless attacks descended, as if capable of destroying worlds. In fact, it was no problem for these attacks to destroy even this planet, yet they had now all stopped, going against any rule. Hong, long, long, furious thunder rang out in the heaven and earth. This was the heaven and earth beginning to target him as it discovered that a being that was stronger than this realm had appeared. Every realm had its own rules. An existence that was too strong could not appear and damage the balance. Ling Han rebuked sharply, and pointed at the skies. Pun, the furious thunder that filled the skies instantly dispersed. He was a celestial king, and had once been the overlord of a realm himself. His level far surpassed the ancient realm. This point of his finger, and a sharp rebuke possessed boundless might. Everyone was watching dumbfounded. That was a heavenly tribulation. A heavenly tribulation could actually be rebuked into retreating? That great saint's legs were shaking. Why you come from the legendary celestial realm? His expression suddenly changed drastically as it suddenly came back to him. Ling Han! You are Ling Han! You are that Ling Han! In the past, Ling Han had killed a great many saints, and the news had spread throughout the entire immortal realm. However, there were some places that were really too far away, and who knew how much time had passed until they finally received the news. Many people did not even believe that this was true. Yet, now that the person himself had appeared to him, and his own attacks had stopped strangely, with the heavenly tribulation being rebuked into retreat. Was that not enough proof? Ling Han shook his head. I gave you a chance, but you refused. He moved, compressing all the attacks into a sphere of light, which he then stuffed into the mouth of that great saint. With a light smack, the sphere of light was swallowed into the great saint's stomach. My lord, spare! That great saint was naturally almost shocked to death, and wanted to beg for mercy. Ping! The light sphere suddenly exploded within his body, and he was instantly turned into pieces. However, the aftermath of the explosion did not spread out, but was rather restrained in a small area. For Ling Han, this naturally was easily done. Zhao Xin and the others were all bursting with shock. They had already estimated Ling Han highly, and thought that he was a Genesis tier saint. They had not thought that even this was an underestimation. This guy was who knew how many times more awesome than any saint. Ling Han swept an eye over them, and said, Our intertwined fates will also come to an end today. My lord! Everyone hurriedly said. Ling Han saying these words meant he was going to leave. Ling Han waved a hand. All good things must come to an end. Work hard on your cultivation. If you can advance further, there may be a day when we will meet again. He was not the maudlin type. With a step, he had already traversed an extremely far distance. He had long since repaid the kindness that had been given to him. Furthermore, he had other affairs, so it was naturally impossible for him to stay here forever. He arrived at a connecting point between the immortal realm and netherworld. There were still battles ongoing here, and countless lower-level cultivators were fighting here, contending over great opportunities. Ling Han's figure descended, and it just so happened that the cultivators of the immortal realm and netherworld were fighting fiercely for a godly medicine. His appearance also immediately drew the attention of both sides. They both slowed their attacks so that he would not benefit from their conflict. Do not advance any further, or we will chop off your head, a cultivator of the immortal realm shouted. Faced with great opportunities, he did not have the slightest bit of feeling that this was one of his countrymen. Ling Han ignored him, and sat down in a cross-legged position instead. He stretched out both hands, one hand communing with the immortal realm, while the other connected to the netherworld. With himself as core, he forcefully merged the two realms. Boom! A heavenly tribulation immediately came resoundingly. The two realms separated was already a fact that had existed for a great many epochs. This separation had formed a kind of energy, so how could it be so easily destroyed? In the past, it was three heavenly venerates that had moved, and that was how the two realms had been ripped apart, so how difficult was it? Thankfully, the two realms had originally been one and the same. The difficulty level of merging them back as one was far lower than that of splitting them apart. Thus, while this was something that only three heavenly venerates moving together had achieved, Ling Han alone could reverse this feat. Of course, it was not something that was instantaneous, but would require an extensive amount of time. Those cultivators that were battling discovered that there was something strange, and immediately shouted at Ling Han. "What are you doing?" Ling Han still took no heed. A monumental change was taking place in the two-realm battlefield. They had truly fused together, and the regulations of heaven and earth were changing, becoming complete. Why do I feel like I still have considerable room for improvement? My foundations are actually so unstable. I can be 10 times stronger than this. Those nearby were the earliest to benefit. The two realms joined together were the true ancient realm, so others could take that final step after reaching Genesis tier, and step into the celestial realm. It was just like how people from a small world would come into the ancient realm through opening the sky. The first feeling was that they were immediately able to break through. This kind of bizarre change immediately drew out the elites of the two-realm battlefield. They looked at Ling Han, and couldn't help but feel stunned. Who exactly was this? Furthermore, who knew what would be the end result of this kind of massive change? Why does this guy look a little like that legendary person? Someone recognized Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had really been too powerful and aggressive in the past. Chapter 25:01 Blessed by the Heaven and Earth, Third Heaven Celestial King. Chapter 25:01 Blessed by the Heaven and Earth, Third Heaven Celestial King. Ling Han fused the two realms. His speed was very fast. In a short decade, he had already fused a galaxy, but in terms of the expansiveness of the ancient realm, this was just a negligible beginning. He immersed himself within, and boundless enlightenment rose up within him. The ancient realm was actually a part of the celestial realm. Using himself as core, and fusing the two realms was equivalent to becoming the overlord of a realm a second time. Amidst the change, he glimpsed the changes in the heaven and earth, and the surging of that unique energy. Even a heavenly venerate could not destroy this realm. No matter how great the destruction, under this unique energy, it would still rebuild itself, and nurture new life. Unless the celestial realm itself crumbled, no one could truly destroy this place. Primordial time flowed in Ling Han's body. The ancient realm had existed for as long as the celestial realm, but Ling Han could not possibly enter into the core of the celestial realm. He did not have that kind of strength, and it was too straining even for a heavenly venerate. And the present circumstances were special. 3 great heavenly venerates had split out the ancient realm, granting Ling Han an opportunity to fuse the two realms into one. This was forced by the circumstances, and the heaven and earth also had that inclination. Otherwise, the two-realm battlefield would not have appeared. This was an instinctive desire to fuse back into one. Thus, the heaven and earth could not resist Ling Han's kind offer. This benefited Ling Han. Something indestructible, everlasting was surging in his mind, allowing him to study and learn. This was a power that belonged only to the celestial realm, and was unique. Even the ancient realm had a slight bit of its mark left behind, and Ling Han continuously grasped it, turning it into his own comprehension. He was overjoyed. This kind of great opportunity was too rare. It was equivalent to 3 great heavenly venerates blessing him with good fortune simultaneously. How many people in this world could get that? He forgot all else, and immersed himself in this kind of enlightenment. He continued to fuse the two realms to obtain more of that ancient material. 100 years, 1,000 years, time passed swiftly. Ling Han forgot about time. In fact, he wanted nothing more than for this to never end. More and more people that had heard of the news came. Everyone could feel the change in the heaven and earth. The two realms were fusing, and then, there would be only one. The heaven and earth of the immortal realm no longer targeted the beings of the netherworld, and the heaven and earth of the netherworld was the same. No, the immortal realm and netherworld no longer existed. There was only one single realm, the ancient realm. "Milord! Milord! Milord!" Everyone knelt down with great respect. They could sense that the heaven and earth that they could touch was more complete, and there was a chance that they could advance into a higher level. To fuse these two realms into one, just what kind of great power was needed? This naturally filled everyone with reverence, and everyone could see the benefit of this, so how could they not feel extreme gratitude towards Ling Han? However, by now, no one could see Ling Han's true figure any longer. He was enshrouded in an incredibly ancient substance, buried deep within. Still, he still maintained the vague shape of a man sitting in a cross-legged position, but his figure became bigger and bigger. This was because Ling Han was gradually extracting more of this ancient material. Several thousand years later, this had become a sacred place. On planets who knew how far away, there would still be people coming here to visit, and bow down in gratitude towards Ling Han. But there were also some who did not believe the legend, and thought that a natural treasure had actually appeared here, and thus made a move. But it was not possible for them to even come close, as they would directly explode into dust. As the number of such cases grew, naturally, no one dared to make an attempt. They all obediently worshipped from the sidelines. 10,000 years, 30,000 years, 100,000 years. 1,000,000 years. Ling Han suddenly awakened from his enlightened state because the two realms were completely merged. In the future, there would no longer be any immortal realm or netherworld, only the ancient realm. It ended just like that? Ling Han couldn't help but purse his lips. He hadn't had enough yet. He had a feeling that the mark of the unique power of the celestial realm had been planted in his body. Even if he went into a transcendent dimension, as long as he had attained the 9th heaven celestial king tier, he could still cultivate to the heavenly venerable tier through this mark. And the transcendent dimensions would similarly possess this unique power. If Ling Han could fuse these two powers into one, then how strong would he be as a first-tier heavenly venerate? To say nothing of reaching the height of the second-tier heavenly venerate, would he be even able to sweep aside all other first-tier heavenly venerates? Thankfully he had fused the two realms only now. If he had done this when he had only been in the Genesis tier, he would definitely have wasted this great opportunity. Ha! To his shock, he discovered that his cultivation level had actually reached the peak stage of the second heaven without his knowledge. There was too much enlightenment and appreciation obtained from fusing the two realms. It had previously been mentioned that this was equivalent to the 3 heavenly venerates helping him raise his cultivation level. How could his cultivation level not progress rapidly through over 1,000,000 years' time? However, why was there no heavenly tribulation? Could it be that this was because he was helping the heaven and earth, so the heaven and earth had deliberately given him a special privilege? And, what a strange feeling. He had broken through, but there actually was no heavenly tribulation. Kwang, a sudden change took place in the heaven and earth. Boundless fragrance descended, enshrouding Ling Han. Ling Han's cultivation level instantly began to increase. Boundless enlightenment rose up in his mind, great Tao manifested. The celestial seed had long since grown into a giant tree, and a celestial flower had bloomed on it. Then, it rapidly wilted, bearing a single fruit. The third transformation of the celestial seed. He was going to become a third heaven celestial king. This? Ling Han was surprised. The heaven and earth actually bestowed great fortune on him? What good deed had he done? Hadn't Heavenborn said that he had been an unfilial child? Realization instantly dawned on Ling Han. He had fused the two realms, and this was a great contribution to the heaven and earth. Furthermore, the heaven and earth was unfeeling, and was the most just. Since he had contributed, there naturally had to be reward. Under the good fortune brought by the heaven and earth, he advanced into third heaven without a doubt. The celestial seed transformed wildly. The celestial tree had borne a fruit, and the fruit dropped, immediately sprouting, growing, and turning back once more into a celestial tree. Of course, it was just a tiny tree. It could not be helped. Though the merit of fusing the ancient realm back into one was massive, the ancient realm was only subsidiary to the celestial realm, and had limited power. Being able to push Ling Han up to the third heaven was still because he had previously already reached the peak stage of the second heaven, and so he just happened to need but a single push to send him into third heaven. This time, the heaven and earth no longer bent the law for him. Thunderclouds gathered densely in the skies, and the heavenly tribulation was already here. This heavenly tribulation was extremely terrifying. There was not the slightest bit of weakening. In fact, it had reached the level of fourth heaven celestial king tier in battle prowess. Ling Han did not dare be careless. He hurriedly unleashed his cultivation level. Boom! Celestial king tier aura surged out, instantly spreading throughout the entire ancient realm. Firstly, this was because he was too strong, and secondly, he had fused the ancient realm into one, and it was inevitable that he had also left behind a sliver of his own mark within, just like a precious tool. Thus, the transmission of his willpower was also overwhelmingly fast. Celestial king tier aura gushed out. This was a power that was invincible in the ancient realm. In fact, no one was worthy of even looking up at this kind of power. Instantly, everyone fell to their knees, trembling wildly. Boom! A massive black hole appeared, swallowing Ling Han up whole, and the tribulation clouds that filled the skies also disappeared instantly without a trace. Ling Han was too powerful, and could not be accommodated in this realm. He had to leave. Otherwise, it would either be the ancient realm that would crush him to death, or he would be bursting the ancient realm into bits. Hence, he left. Ling Han crossed over the realm barrier. As long as one's power reached the peak stage of the Genesis tier, they would be worthy of bursting through this realm barrier and entering to the celestial realm, and Ling Han was already a third heaven celestial king by now. Just how strong had his battle prowess become? Naturally, he easily penetrated straight into the celestial realm. The scenery in front of his eyes changed suddenly. He appeared in a forest. A familiar air assailed him, and he knew that he had returned to the celestial realm. Quang! Thunder boomed alarmingly. The heavenly tribulation was hot on his tail. Ling Han laughed loudly. Come on, let me see just what level my strength has reached. Chapter 2502 The Current Circumstances. Chapter 2502 The Current Circumstances. Boom! The heavenly tribulation descended, turning into a massive, heavy sword that blazed with lightning, striking down on Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly, and condensed the power of regulation to meet this strike. Boom! His fists burst with light that dazzled the world as he faced the heavenly tribulation head-on. The might of the heavenly tribulation had indeed reached the fourth heaven, but Ling Han's battle prowess was even stronger. His battle prowess was directly above the middle stage of the fourth heaven, soaring close to the fifth heaven. The celestial seed was rapidly sprouting, and maturing for the third time. 3 golden celestial patterns could be clearly seen on the celestial seed, 2 of them extremely deep, while the third was extremely light, so light that it was practically invisible, but it was presently becoming deeper. When the heavenly tribulation arrived, this was the time of fastest improvement. The power of heaven and earth naturally was the most fundamental power, and was the most beneficial in terms of maturing regulations. With Ling Han bursting with endless battle cries, his fists danced like a wind as he showed not the slightest bit of fear in face of the heavenly tribulation. With a few strikes, he shattered the tribulation. This was a one-sided suppression of strength. The heavenly tribulation was already strong enough, and Ling Han was clearly undergoing a third heaven heavenly tribulation, but what had descended was at the fourth heaven. However, Ling Han was even more freakish. His battle prowess was over the middle stage of the fourth heaven, advancing towards the fifth heaven. He stimulated the celestial seed in his body to grow with all his power. This was a rare chance. In truth, his cultivation level had really increased too quickly. It was like he had suddenly surged up from the first heaven to third heaven in the blink of an eye. There would definitely be a factor of instability in his cultivation level. Hence, he planned to stabilize and strengthen his foundations and cultivation level after breaking through this time. Half a day's time soon passed. Ling Han stood firmly, a hint of a smile curling the corners of his lips. His present cultivation level had stopped at the early stage of the third heaven, and it looked like he had walked half the way. This was already extremely impressive. Where is this? Ling Han sensed the density of the spiritual qi. The difference between the Western Celestial Realm and Eastern Celestial Realm was quite wide. Western Celestial Realm, he immediately answered his own question. Then, with a movement, he flew towards the boundless seas. He was going to travel to the east, and return to the Eastern Celestial Realm to find his parents. He believed that if the Empress and the others were still in the Eastern Celestial Realm, they would definitely be waiting there for him. And if they had already left the Celestial Realm, they would definitely have left a message for him there. With how great the speed of a Celestial King was, especially for Ling Han, this kind of Celestial King that was proficient in the regulations of space, he had arrived at the coast in about half a month's time. In the past, these seas were incredibly dangerous to him, but the present he considered this a smooth journey. As long as he did not encounter any great beast of the seventh heaven Celestial King tier and above, he could face everything calmly. He began to cross the seas. There was no need for him to worry if he would barge into the lair of some powerful marine beasts. He simply advanced on a straight course. Some marine beasts did not even realize he had passed them by, and those that did were completely incapable of matching him. They could only tremble in fear, and feel thankful that Ling Han had not attacked them. However, it was not every marine creature that would act the same, after all. When Ling Han passed by an island, a golden rock shot into the skies, and set off in pursuit of him. This great rock was proficient in the regulations of space. With a flap of its wings, it had thrown a boundless distance behind it. A shrill cry rang from its beak, the sound wave reverberating, and possessing frightening destructive power. Ling Han had initially no plans to cause trouble, but after he dodged a few times, this great rock was still not willing to let him go. Involuntarily, Ling Han was also angered, and stood still. Die! When the golden-winged great rock blasted its divine sense towards Ling Han, its figure also descended sharply, its claws aiming straight for Ling Han. It was as if they were forged from divine metal, and could easily tear apart the body of a low-tier celestial king. It was a fourth heaven existence. Ling Han humphed, and drew the divine demon's sword, which he lowered sharply in a slash. Pooh! Blood spurted and sprayed from the golden-winged great rock. Its claws had been forcefully chopped off. It paled in shock, and only now did it know that Ling Han's tolerance of it had not been because he was outmatched, but because he had not taken it to heart at all. It hurriedly flapped its wings, wanting to flee, but how could Ling Han allow it to leave now that he was forced to fight back? He followed up with another sword strike. Pooh! Another fountain of blood gushed out, and the golden-winged great rock instantly fell from the skies. However, it had not fallen too far when Ling Han had stretched out a hand and got hold of it, stowing it inside his spatial god tool. With his present strength, it was just a matter of a single thought for him to create a spatial god tool. Flying beasts were extremely delicious in the first place, what more when this was a celestial king at that? How could he allow all its flesh to go to waste? The heaven and earth grieved, a boundless shower of blood raining down, also scaring the great beasts in this area of the sea into hurriedly rushing to the depths of the great seas as they feared that Ling Han would start a massacre. Ling Han smiled faintly, and continued his journey. After all, celestial kings were not so common. Though there were a considerable number of celestial kings in the boundless seas, the latter themselves were overwhelmingly huge. Just how high were the chances of Ling Han just happening to pass by the lair of a great celestial king-tier beast? Another month later, he had crossed the boundless seas, and set foot on the soil of the Eastern Celestial Realm. He discerned the directions slightly, and then continued advancing. 8 days later, he arrived at where his parents were. He felt a little anxious. After all, too much time had really elapsed this time round. He feared he would witness a scene that would break his heart. He arrived, and called out loudly, "Father, Mother! Hey, what are you shouting for?" There were guards here, and they immediately rebuked him sharply. "Are you an idiot? Coming here and calling father and mother? One of the guards laughed. Why does this guy look a little familiar? Lord Ling Han. He had been recognized, and someone immediately went off to report his arrival. Now, it had become lively. His parents, uncle, eldest and third brother, and Lu Yutong and the other women all surged forth to greet him. Seeing that Ling Han was fine, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Though they all firmly believed that Ling Han would definitely be fine, they would still feel anxious and could not rest easy unless they saw him with their own eyes. Ling Han briefly related his experiences. Though over 1,000,000 years had passed, he had not done many things, so speaking of his experiences was just a matter of a few words. However, the experiences of the others were much more varied. Next, they naturally talked about the Empress and the others. Zhou Heng had deliberately waited for Ling Han another few thousand years. In fact, he had even used his methods to search for him. However, this was the celestial realm, after all. He could not unleash his full abilities, fearing that he would cause this realm to burst in a moment of carelessness. Thus, he had not found Ling Han, and could only take the others with him and make an advance departure. The Empress, Hun Yo, Bewitching Maiden Ro, the Rain Emperor, and the others had all left. As long as they had the aptitude of a monarch tier, it was fine. In a transcendent dimension, even a monarch tier would have a sliver of hope of becoming a heavenly venerate. Of course, the chance of this happening was pitifully low. It might be that not even one would succeed out of 100 million, but there was still hope, after all. What surprised Ling Han was the fact that Heavenborn was actually included. This guy had caused a massacre, and at least over 10,000 celestial kings had died by his hand, and they actually allowed him to go into the transcendent dimension? It was said that Heavenborn's aptitude is too great, and there are very high hopes that he could become a heavenly venerate in the future. Feng Piyun explained. This naturally was not something that he had heard from Zhou Heng, but rather a message relayed by the Empress and the others. Ling Han frowned. It looked like the war situation in the transcendent dimension was extremely tense. Otherwise, they would not have brought even such a bringer of slaughter like Heavenborn with them. Only Heavenly Venerable Tier could resist hysteria. The difference was that a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate was absolutely the main force, while a 1st-tier Heavenly Venerate could only help here and there. But no matter how minor their role, they could still be of some use, at the very least. This is the dimensional transfer seal that Lord Zhou has left for you. Feng Piyun handed over a jade seal. It looked to be completely average, and did not seem to be anything special. Lord Zhou has said that as long as you activate it with Celestial King tier power, you can send around 10 people into the Transcendent Dimension. Chapter 2503 Arrival. Chapter 2503 Arrival. Ling Han nodded. Zhou Heng looked upon him highly, and that was why he had left behind this dimensional transfer seal. Just thinking, he knew that this kind of item definitely had to be very hard to create, or Zhou Heng would not have had limited the numbers in the past. Yet now, in a situation when he could not have confirmed Ling Han's life or death at all, he had still left this behind, which showed how high his opinion of Ling Han was. Ling Han received the transfer seal, and felt very rueful. In the next few days he did not do much else, but simply spent time with his parents, brothers, and the others. After this, he would go to the Transcendent Dimension, and he really did not know how much time it would be until he could next return after this long journey. He naturally left behind all the Celestial King pills. When his parents, Feng Piyun, and the others reached the peak stage of the Ascending Origin tier, they could use this pill to advance to the Celestial King tier, and truly gain an immortal lifespan. He also took out that great Celestial King Tirok for a barbecue. The violent aura within it had been refined by Ling Han, and it had become an extremely nutritious food. But even so, everyone could only take a small piece, or they would definitely die. The Celestial King tier bird had a lot of meat, and everyone would need several decades to be able to digest the benefits it contained after eating it once. Thus, it was enough for them to eat for several 100 million years. On the other side, Ling Han naturally was also increasing the might of his body art and the divine demon's sword. After reaching the Transcendent Dimension, he would definitely be unable to use the regulations he had grasped now. He would need to start from the beginning again, but celestial techniques would not be affected. Thus, he had to improve his body art. This naturally needed a bit of time, but Ling Han was not concerned. In any case, he had already delayed for over 1,000,000 years, so what would a few more years, or a few tens of thousands of years, hurt? Of course, when Ling Han had pushed his body art to the limit of his current cultivation level, this was already a matter of 20,000 years later. In terms of body art, his vitality index had broken through 9,000, which was completely enough to fight a fifth heaven celestial king. In fact, an ordinary peak stage fifth heaven celestial king would not even be a match for him. Even in the transcendent dimension, this kind of strength was completely capable of claiming a niche, right? Ling Han bade his parents and brothers farewell, and then activated the dimensional transfer seal while bringing the women with him. He poured in the mighty power of the celestial king tier. Instantly, the jade seal flowed, dazzling the entire celestial realm. Then, a sphere of light wrapped around Ling Han and the others. Xiao, tearing open the celestial realm, it began traversing through countless realms. When everyone felt light flashing madly in their eyes, and could not see anything at all. The clothes they were wearing were all ripped apart, and even spatial god tools were no exception. Aside from living beings, nothing would survive. In fact, even their hair was lost. It could not be helped. This was a transfer seal, and could only safely send them into the transcendent dimension, but there was no guarantee of anything else, unlike when Zhou hung himself moving with the might of a heavenly venerable tier, in which case this kind of dimensional compression would naturally be no big deal. They all felt extremely terrible, as if they were mere mortals that had taken an extremely bumpy ride on a carriage, ending up feeling extremely nauseous. When they were just about at the limits of their tolerance, space cracked apart, and they shot out like the scattered flowers from the hand of a celestial maiden. Ling Han was the fastest to react. Stretching out a hand and pressing down, he froze all the women in their movement. With a thought, source power turned into clothing, protecting his body. When one had reached a cultivation level like his, there was actually no need for clothes. Source power could manifest into anything, and it was more useful than anything else. Hair also grew immediately. His vitality was extremely strong, so this was no big deal. The women exchanged looks, and all felt slightly embarrassed. Though they were all Ling Han's beautiful wives, they had never appeared naked all at the same time. They, too, used origin power to form clothing as protection. Of course, their hair and eyebrows had to be grown at the first instant. They were shy, but prized beauty even more. Ling Han laughed loudly. This naturally caused the women to blush even harder, and they thought, could our husband be having some inappropriate thoughts? But this had truly wronged Ling Han. With a smile, he withdrew his gaze, and looked around their surroundings. This was a swamp, and there was fog rising all around them. Even if he was a celestial king, he actually could not cast his sight to its full limits. He could only see around 5 kilometers around him. It should be known that his battle prowess was directly close to the peak stage of the fifth heaven celestial king tier. He could not see their surroundings clearly, and his divine sense was also restricted. Naturally, he would not dare to use his full speed. Otherwise, if he encountered any sudden situation, such as crashing into a powerful creature, wouldn't that be fun now? This was a transcendent dimension. Ling Han believed he would have no problem ensuring his own safety, but there was definitely no way he could do as he liked here. As expected of the transcendent dimension, taking me a notch down straight off the start, Ling Han said smilingly. They did not discern the direction either. In any case, it would be useless even if they did. They just headed in a single direction, and were sure that they would definitely be able to walk out of this place with a straight course. As they traveled, everyone was adapting themselves. As expected, in a different dimension, the regulations would also be different. The regulations they had initially grasped could no longer be used. In this place, they would only be equivalent to the Genesis tier, and did not even have the ability to fly. Ling Han was no exception either. However, His body art was too amazing. Was there any need for him to fly? A single leap was faster than the speed of the majority of celestial kings. Of course, he did not dare speed up at present. They did not stay idle, but were rather recultivating with the regulations of this place. As expected of a transcendent dimension, they soon formed a common understanding. In terms of number, the regulations here were not much different from the celestial realm. There was just an additional regulation of darkness and light, as well as 3 other regulations that Ling Han could not name as of yet. It could not be helped. He had never come into contact with these regulations, so how could he name them? But for the similar regulations of metal, this great Tao was much more complex and closer to its essence. This undoubtedly raised the difficulty level of cultivation, but the benefit was also extremely apparent. Because if they cultivated like this to 9th heaven, they would be even closer to the essence of heaven and earth, and would be able to grasp the power of heaven and earth more easily, and step into the heavenly venerable tier from there. No wonder 6th tier heavenly venerates could be nurtured here, or even 7th tier heavenly venerates. Ling Han created another spatial god tool, and then stowed all the women inside. This place was filled with unknown dangers, so it was best to be careful. If he was by himself, he could come and go as he pleased, which would greatly increase the safety level. He strolled onwards slowly. The swamp was enshrouded in fog, and there was a strange stickiness to the ground. His legs would at least be swallowed up to the knees with a single step, and if he could not exert force in time, it was possible that even his entire person would be sunken in. This was also why Ling Han did not allow the women to travel with him. It would affect their speed too much. The primary reason was because they had not grasped the regulations here yet, and naturally could not move the elements, and would thus be trapped by their circumstances. Thankfully, Ling Han's body art was too strong. With a light jump, he could leap through the skies. This swamp was very filthy and the water muddy and clouded, exuding a rank stench. When one lifted a foot, bubbles would emerge, as if countless bodies were buried beneath. The smell was really intoxicating. Even Ling Han found it slightly unbearable. He held a hand to his nose to avoid being attacked by this poisonous stench. The swamp was extremely huge. After walking for a day, there was still no sign that he was about to leave this swamp. He could not help but increase his speed, because he had also developed some understanding of this place after this one day and night. Setting aside the issue that it was hard to travel here, this was actually a plateau, and there was no sign of life. Ping! His feet exerted force, and his speed immediately began to spike. In a flash, another 3 days had passed. Ling Han rapidly raced forth, and suddenly felt like something black was barreling towards him. He hurriedly stepped on the brakes, but it was still too late. That black thing had crashed into him. Ling Han did not attack, because he instantly realized that this was a wild beast. However, it was only at the ascending origin tier, and there was no need for him to be concerned at all. Ling Han did not move in the slightest with this collision, but that wild beast was sent flying. Thankfully, Ling Han had stopped in the nick of time, or it would definitely have exploded from the impact and turned into a shower of blood. Even so, this wild beast was still dazed. It could not even stand steadily, and was turning around in circles on the spot. Ling Han could see very clearly. This was a massive green frog. Its back was dark green in color, while its belly was white. There were 3 golden strokes on its forehead, and if there was another vertical stroke, it could call itself the King of Frogs 1. We've caught up to it! At this time, 3 people also arrived, as quick as lightning. Chapter 2504 The Duplicate Moon Sect. Chapter 2504 The Duplicate Moon Sect. 3 figures shot forwards from afar. Because the range of visibility here was only around 1 kilometer, when Ling Han saw them, the 3 of them had actually arrived within his vicinity. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and saw that this trio was made up of 2 men and a woman. They were all very young, but looked imposing. They were actually all at the ascending origin tier, and all of them were in the consummate level at that. He saw that they were only several tens of millions of years old, Yet all of them had reached the consummate level of the ascending origin tier, and were only a single step away from the celestial king tier. Hold on, how were cultivation levels differentiated in this place? Ling Han could only make deductions based on the strength of the aura they emanated that they were equivalent to the ascending origin tier in the celestial realm. Their natural talent was indeed extraordinary. The three of them paid no mind to Ling Han, and merely went on to kill that giant green frog. Because the giant green frog was already dazed from colliding with Ling Han, it was soon dealt with when the three of them suppressed it forcefully. Haha, now that we have the venom sac of this golden-veined frog, we will be able to cure the illness of Master's wife. The three of them stowed the giant green frog away, and all of them were extremely delighted. Ling Han also smiled slightly. He had finally seen someone, so he knew that he was not just running around aimlessly here. Then, he could just have these three people lead the way, or simply follow them in secret, and he naturally would be able to walk out of this swamp. Why is there another person here? Strange hidden radiance stage? How could even a hidden radiance stage dare to enter here? The trio discovered Ling Han, and all of them looked surprised. After these several days, Ling Han's grasp of regulations had already returned once more to the severing mundane tier. Since the other party said that he was at the so-called hidden radiance stage, this was probably one of the classes of cultivation levels in this transcendent dimension. The hidden radiance stage should be the equivalent of the severing mundane tier. How did you get in here? A young man asked Ling Han. He was dressed in a tight bodysuit of green. Ling Han had absolutely zero knowledge of this world, and thus chose to keep an extremely low profile, and said, I don't know myself. I was just practicing my cultivation technique, when all of a sudden, a black hole swallowed me up. Then I realized I had ended up here, and no matter what I tried, I could not walk my way out. His words mixed truth with lie, and were actually very close to the truth. He only made no mention that he had come from the celestial realm via the dimensional transfer seal. Even if he did, they might not believe it, unless he exhibited the might of his body art. What was the point? The three people exchanged looks, and all felt this was inconceivable. But if that hadn't been the case, what other explanation would there have been that a person in the hidden radiance stage could come into the cloudy dream marsh? It is indeed possible that a sudden twist in space occurred, and randomly transported someone into any corner of the world. The other young man in blue attire said, I have heard Master say that this is because of the great war outside the realm, which has affected the stability of space. The man in green and the woman in red both nodded. Since this was what Master said, it had to be the case. Let's bring him along, the woman in red said. The man in green nodded. With his little bit of strength, to say nothing of having to take a good many years just to walk out of the cloudy dream marsh, he would have long since been devoured by the wild beasts here. Continue the lecture after we have brought him out of the swamp. The man in blue nodded in agreement as well. The man in green moved, and his power took the form of a giant hand, which took hold of Ling Han. The three of them both soared, dancing through the air as they flew. Their speed was actually not as fast as Ling Han's, but Ling Han was not concerned about this little bit of time difference. Expressing his thanks, he began to cultivate. His grasp of regulations had to return to the celestial king tier as soon as possible. After all, this would limit the growth of his body art as well. Seeing how Ling Han was actually closing his eyes to cultivate, the woman in red and her companions clicked their tongues in amazement as they thought, this brat really has great composure. He can actually keep his cool to cultivate in this kind of situation. This trip actually took as long as 3 months. They finally left the swamp, and a mountain forest appeared ahead of them instead. The man in green set Ling Han down, and was just about to tell Ling Han to go on his own way when his eyes suddenly widened. Senior Brother Luo, what is it? The woman in red asked. The man in green pointed at Ling Han, and even his face was twitching. What's up with him? He suddenly sprouted horns? The man in blue joked, but when his eyes swept over Ling Han, his eyes bulged in a similar way. 4th level of the hidden radiance. The woman in red also looked over, and instantly exclaimed in shock. What kind of joke was this? Previously, this guy had just barely advanced into the Hidden Radiance stage. Why was he now already at the 4th level of the Hidden Radiance stage? This progress was so fast. Who would ever believe it? An extraordinary genius! Incomparably extraordinary genius! They all exclaimed, incredibly stunned. Strange, why is there no heavenly tribulation? The man in green murmured. This was illogical. No matter what, there should have been 3 instances of heavenly tribulation. The woman in red pondered for a moment. There are a rare few that can progress at a rate as fast as this. Perhaps he is a beloved child of the heaven and earth, so there will be no heavenly tribulation imposed on him. Was this even possible? The man in green and the man in blue exchanged looks, but it seemed like only this explanation was more logical. What is your name? The woman in red suddenly asked Ling Han. Ling Han, are you willing to join the Duplicate Moon Sect? The woman in red asked further. Ling Han pretended to consider the question. I know nothing about the Duplicate Moon Sect. The man in green immediately understood. He was a supremely excellent young talent. If they could bring him into their sect, he would definitely become a strong pillar of support for the sect. Furthermore, they, as the people who had discovered Ling Han's talent, would acquire a relationship that would be enough to benefit them for their whole lifetime. It's fine even if you don't know. Just go and take a look. In any case, you are not able to return to your original location now, he said. The man in blue hurriedly nodded. That's right. Come and take a look. Once they went to the Duplicate Moon Sect, they had the confidence that Ling Han would never want to leave again. That place was the amazing sight of a celestial king. Ling Han was also of a mind to find out more about this world, so he nodded, and agreed to join the 3 of them. The 4 of them arrived at the closest city. There was a transfer formation here which allowed for convenient travel to various locations. Ling Han took the opportunity to chat idly with the 3 of them, and feigned ignorance so he could find out more about this world. The man in green was named Luo Xing, the man in blue robes was Ji Xueming, and the woman in red was Li Wan, and they were all disciples of the Duplicate Moon Sect. The purpose of them coming out this time was that giant green frog, and the reason was their master's wife, in other words, the wife of the sect master of Duplicate Moon Sect, who had fallen ill, and this illness could only be cured with the use of that giant green frog. Their master could not free himself, because he had to constantly use his own power to maintain the vital signs of his wife. Otherwise, there was a chance that she could die at any instant. Thus, they moved on behalf of their master, seeking the means to cure their master's wife. Though it had taken some time, the end result was still good. And added with Ling Han, their venture could be considered perfect. This transcendent dimension was called the Flaming Frost Realm, and the hierarchy of cultivation levels was actually not much different from the Celestial Realm. The only difference was in the different names of various cultivation levels. And here, celestial kings were also called celestial kings, while heavenly venerates were also heavenly venerates. There was not much difference. However, the 3 of them knew absolutely nothing about the horrifying big guy, Hysteria. They only knew that there was a battlefield outside their realm, and war never ended there. Even ascending origin tiers like them were not worthy of taking part in this kind of conflict yet. Ling Han guessed that that was where the war against Hysteria was taking place. Indeed, even celestial kings were not qualified to interfere, what more ascending origin tiers. Even if there was a transference portal that could greatly decrease journeying time, they still needed more than half a year to finally arrive at the foot of the peaceful Sun Mountains. This was where the Duplicate Moon Sect was located, but the peaceful Sun Mountains were extremely massive. There was actually still quite a considerable distance until the Duplicate Moon Sect's actual location. Hee, stop! 10 people suddenly appeared in front of them, blocking their path. Chapter 2505 Traitor. Chapter 2505 Traitor. 10 people appeared, blocking the entry into the mountains for Ling Han and the others. Who are you people? Luo Xing demanded immediately. A bearded middle-aged man from the other side rubbed his chin and grinned. It is not important who we are. What is important is that all of you will have to stay here, and have a nice chat with us. Seventh brother Ma, we have no wish to chat with 3 men. Immediately, someone joined in the excitement. That's right. Even if we want to chat, it has to be with a woman. This young miss is quite pretty. Haha, we love talking and chatting with this kind of woman. And it has to be an open-minded chat too one. These people all laughed raucously. Though their words were very indecent, there was no hint of anything perverted or lewd in their expressions. Their goals seemed to be to only anger Li Wan and the others. Though Li Wan very much wanted to suppress her fury, she was still trembling with anger, flames of rage flickering in her eyes. To dare act so insolently in front of the entrance of our duplicate moon sect, you people are truly outrageously bold, Luo Xing declared menacingly. He had already drawn a long saber. Light reflected off the saber's blade, emitting an intimidating chill. I am so afraid! One of the people who had blocked their way wrapped his arms around himself, and then erupted into loud laughter. Duplicate moon sect? After a few more years, it will be hard to say whether this sect will still even exist. How dare you! Luo Xing and the others rebuked at the same time. Hee, your Lord Sect Master is busy maintaining the vital signs for your Lady Sect Mistress. As long as your Lady Sect Mistress never recovers, your Lord Sect Master will only become weaker and weaker. One of the people who had intercepted them said, bearing a strange smile on his face. Luo Xing and the others were startled, and then immediately looked stunned. Could it be, you are members of the Red Flower Sect? You guessed correctly, one of the people who had intercepted them replied. Could it be that Lord Sect Mistress's illness is the result of one of your ploys? Luo Xing exclaimed in shock. Another correct guess. These people who had blocked their way were all laughing loudly. The expressions of Luo Xing and his group changed drastically. From the look of things now, this matter was entirely a conspiracy from the very beginning. The Red Flower Sect was a direct competitor of the Duplicate Moon Sect. Who knew how many years the two sects had been clashing to contend for a bountiful mine, which produced precious divine stones. In fact, it was possible that even divine metal could be mined from it. Thus, this was a site that they would definitely fight over, and for the sake of this, who knew how many years the two great sects had been fighting for. The strongest elite of the Duplicate Moon Sect was naturally their Lord Sect Master, whose name was Azure Sun Celestial King, and his cultivation level had reached the 2nd heaven. And the Azure Sun Celestial King was the only Celestial King in the Duplicate Moon Sect. Thus, as long as he was gotten rid of, it would naturally be an easy matter to destroy the Duplicate Moon Sect. The Red Flower Sect had finally found an opening as well, and that was the wife of the Azure Sun Celestial King. Azure Sun Celestial King loved her deeply. Have the Sect Master's wife fall ill so that the Azure Sun Celestial King would have to endlessly use his own power to maintain her vital science. As long as the Sect Master's wife did not recover, the Azure Sun Celestial King's battle prowess would be restrained, and eventually, there would come a day when his vitality would be greatly wounded. That way, when the Red Flower Sect launched a heavy assault, the Duplicate Moon Sect could possibly crumble overnight. Being able to reach the ascending origin tier, Luo Xing and his group naturally could not be fools. Immediately, they guessed the truth behind the matter, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. This was a conspiracy, but it was also an overt conspiracy because even if the Azure Sun Celestial King knew, so what? Would he cease his actions? No wonder these people wanted to stop them from returning to the sect. They naturally could not allow the Lady Sect Mistress to recover from her illness. You people are too despicable, Luo Xing and his group rebuked. Who asked your Lord Sect Master to be a romantic? The people who had blocked their path all laughed loudly. They had long since expected this, and had thus planted a great many elites at the foot of the mountains to snipe disciples such as Luo Xing. Die! Luo Xing exclaimed darkly. Ji Xueming nodded. Junior sister Li, senior brother Luo, and I will hold these people back later. You break through with all your power and ascend the mountains. As long as Master gets the news, he will definitely descend the mountains to save us. If they called out for help here, it would be too far a distance. There was no way that they would be able to get any reinforcements. Otherwise, the enemies would not have intercepted them here. Li Wan looked hesitant, but still nodded. Senior brothers, you guys have to take care of yourselves. Charge! Luo Xing bellowed loudly. Li Wan immediately charged out, but a flash of sword light swept out, and directly sank into the back of Li Wan's head. No one had expected this scene, and Li Wan had never imagined that an attack would come towards her from her rear. Her whole mind was focused on breaking through the blockade, so she had been caught completely off guard. Instantly, the attack landed on her full on. Pa! She collapsed, blood seeping all over the ground. Who had done this? Everyone turned to look towards Ji Xueming, and saw this man suddenly break out into a strange-looking, chilling grin. Ji Xueming, you're mad! Luo Xing roared in fury. It was Ji Xueming who had delivered this sword strike. I'm mad? Ji Xueming laughed loudly. Suddenly, he made an extremely strange hand gesture. When the members of the Red Flower Sect saw this, they all couldn't help but feel stunned. They had not recovered their wits from seeing the scene of fellow members of the same sect kill each other, and when they saw Ji Xueming's hand gesture, they were even more surprised. Hurriedly, they all bowed. Greetings, young sect master! What? Luo Xing felt a chill come over his whole body. This junior brother of his was actually a member of the Red Flower Sect. Ji Xueming broke into a smile. Before joining the Duplicate Moon Sect, I was already the young sect master of the Red Flower Sect, but master has never brought me back to the sect, so this matter is known to no one. Luo Xing's eyes turned, and he thought of another possibility. He couldn't help but become even more angered. You were also the one who poisoned Mrs. His tone was one of affirmation because this matter had always seemed strange. Their Mrs. never usually descended the mountains, so how else would she have gotten poisoned? Thus, if it was the action of one of their own, it could explain everything. Ji Xueming smiled slightly. That's right. It was me. Luo Xing trembled. The Red Flower Sect had really invested very much into this scheme because Ji Xueming had joined the sect 30 million years ago. In other words, this scheme had already been planned and put into action over 30 million years ago. When Ji Xueming finally entered into the threshold, and won the full trust of the Azure Sun Celestial King, the truth would finally be revealed. Too frightening. This was too frightening. Thus, strictly speaking, I am no traitor, right? Ji Xueming said, his expression calm. Now, it was 11 against 1. Oh right, there was Ling Han as well, but he was only in the hidden radiance stage, so he was completely insignificant. Ji Xueming's chances of victory were assured. He only had to get rid of Luo Xing, and he would be completely capable of striding boldly back into the Duplicate Moon Sect. As for the deaths of Li Wan and Luo Xing, he would find some excuse to explain the matter. Luo Xing was in despair. Ji Xueming, having revealed his true identity, would naturally have complete confidence that he could get rid of Luo Xing, and ensure that the secret would not be leaked. He was done for, and with a traitor like Ji Xueming there, the Duplicate Moon Sect would soon collapse as well. Ha! Luo Xing laughed tragically, tears of blood streaming from his eyes. He drew a long saber, his fighting spirit soaring. Only death will end this battle. Who will come to their death? Even if I die, there will be another who will die with me. Yet Ji Xueming shook his head. Senior brother Luo, you seem to be a little dull-witted. Could it be that you still do not know my personality? Since I have moved, would I leave you any room to struggle? Luo Xing's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly inspected himself. He couldn't help but become extremely furious. You actually poisoned me. Ha ha ha, the best strategy is to deal with your enemies without any need for battle. Ji Xueming laughed. On the basis that we once were comrades of the same sect, let me send you off on your last trip. He was just about to take a step forward when his body involuntarily shuddered as he revealed a hint of shock. Li Wan, who should have died earlier on, had suddenly stood back up. He had to be seeing things. Chapter 2506 Coming Back to Life. Chapter 2506 Coming Back to Life. A person that Ji Xueming had clearly killed suddenly stood back up. How could he not feel a chill rise up his spine at the sight? It should be known that while there were in this world supreme elites that could destroy stars and crumble the ground with a single move, and could evaporate the sea with a single breath, there was definitely no possible way a dead person could be revived. Yes, a heavenly venerate could do it, but even a heavenly venerate would have to pay an exorbitant price for it. It was definitely not something as simple as just a casual move. If it was to be claimed that Li Wan had been revived by a heavenly venerate, Ji Xueming wouldn't believe it even if it killed him. But the problem here was that Li Wan really had stood up. "Senior Sister Li!" Luo Xing was filled with pleasant surprise, but at the same time also felt slightly cautious because who knew whether Li Wan was of the same flock as Ji Xueming, putting an act on for his sake merely for the sake of launching a sneak attack on him. Of course, the chance of this was too low. Luo Xing was already poisoned at present, and the enemy had as many as 11 ascending origin tiers. No matter how he thought, there would be no need to use such a low-handed trick. "Ji Xueming!" Li Wan spat out each word, her voice filled with fury. Ji Xueming forcefully kept his cool. He stared at Li Wan. "I do not believe that a dead person can come back to life. You probably have some kind of treasure to substitute for you, right?" How could Li Wan have anything? She only knew that a sword had struck her from behind, and she had been completely unguarded. But just when the blade of the sword had been about to touch the back of her head, a powerful force had pushed her down, and then she could not move at all. Hearing Ji Xueming's performance, she was practically exploding with anger. Subsequently, she suddenly recovered mobility, and then stood back up. In truth, she was also very confused. Could it be that there was an elite helping them in secret? She naturally would not be giving him any explanation. She rebuked, "You shameless man, you will not get an easy death." Actually, Ji Xueming would not feel the slightest fear towards a living person. What he was concerned about now was just why Li Wan had managed to come back to life. He smiled slightly and said, "Senior Sister Li, could it be that you have forgotten my previous words? I have always been the type to leave nothing to chance." Clearly, it was not just Luo Xing he had poisoned. Even Li Wan had not been exempted. Li Wan's expression instantly changed. Ji Xueming stabbing her from behind should have only been a whim of his as he just happened to have the opportunity to do so, but poisoning both her and Luo Xing definitely had to have been a long-planned conspiracy. He had the intentions, and they were unguarded against him. Who would have thought that a fellow disciple whom they had lived with for tens of millions of years would actually be an undercover agent from an enemy sect? "Though I have to expend a little more effort, it has absolutely no effect on the greater picture," Ji Xueming said. With a wave of his hand, the 10 ascending origin tiers from the Red Flower sect immediately walked over, approaching Luo Xing and Li Wan. Both Li Wan and Luo Xing frowned deeply. Now that things had progressed this far, it seemed like they could predict their end by now. "Sigh." Ling Han sighed. Was he really a bringer of calamity that would encounter trouble wherever he went? He had only wanted to find some place to settle down and ascertain the situation. Then, he could find out where the Empress and the others were, and go over calmly. Why wasn't he allowed to relax just a bit? "Brother Ling, what are you sighing for?" Ji Xueming asked laughingly. "You have no need to fear. I will not kill you. I will study absolutely thoroughly a prodigy of cultivation like you. This kind of ability, I very much wish to possess it." To practically cultivate the hidden radiance stage completely within half a year's time was a kind of natural talent that could only be described as legendary, which filled him with curiosity, as well as greed. Ling Han broke into a smile. "Could it be that you are not curious just how this woman came back to life?" Ji Xueming laughed loudly. "Could it be it was you behind it then? I have never coveted the merits of others, but I would not hide my actions either." "Of course it was me." Ling Han nodded. Ji Xueming would naturally not believe it. Ling Han was but a mere hidden radiance stage. If he did have that kind of strength, wouldn't even pigs fly? "Kill them," he said lowly. The 10 members of the Red Flower sect charged out. They had long since lost their patience. "Begone!" Ling Han roared, and his voice instantly rumbled out like thunder, deafening and ear-splitting. Every single person felt their mind buzz, and then all that was left was a complete blank. When they came back to their senses, they were all looking at Ling Han with eyes filled with absolute shock. The might of a roar was actually so frightening. Just how terrifyingly strong was this person then? It really was you! Ji Xueming pointed a finger at Ling Han as he stuttered, his hand trembling slightly. Ling Han smiled faintly. He had secretly given Li Wan a slight shove when Ji Xueming had attacked just now. As for the blood, that was real. Li Wan had indeed sustained injury, but it was not too severe. He gave another shout. "Azure Sun Celestial King, please come out for a meeting!" Boom! The sound turned into a terrifying ripple that reverberated throughout the peaceful Sun Mountain. The shouts of Luo Xing and Li Wan could not be transmitted because of their limited strength, but Ling Han's body art had directly reached the peak stage of the fifth heaven. With this shout, there was no issue to envelop the whole of the peaceful Sun Mountains. In merely an instant, a figure streaked through the air and arrived. This person was enshrouded in 2 streaks of peculiar light. This was a symbol that could not be any more obvious. This person was a second heaven celestial king. The Azure Sun Celestial King. "How dare you!" The Azure Sun Celestial King's eyes swept over them, and he instantly humphed. Members of the Red Flower Sect actually dared come here to cause trouble. Were they really planning to step all over him? Though he could not travel far, it was fine for him to just leave slightly for a short while. Ji Xueming shuddered fearfully, and he knelt onto the ground with a sudden turn of his eyes. "Master, you have finally come. I thought I would never be able to see you again. Both senior brother Luo and junior sister Li are traitors, and they were the ones who poisoned Mrs. This. To say nothing of both Li Wan and Luo Xing feeling utter fury, even Ling Han was slightly surprised. Could a person really be as shameless as this? "Master, he is spouting rubbish. He is the undercover agent from the Red Flower Sect," Luo Xing hurriedly exclaimed. Li Wan also nodded repeatedly. The moment the Azure Sun Celestial King appeared, they had subconsciously ignored Ling Han, because in their hearts and eyes, their master was the strongest person of all, and Ling Han was not enshrouded by any peculiar light, so how could he be a Celestial King? The Azure Sun Celestial King naturally held his own judgment. Just look at the situation now. 10 elites of the Red Flower Sect had surrounded Luo Xing and Li Wan, and Ji Xueming was standing outside of the siege. Was that still not enough to describe the problem? "Unfilial disciple!" This Celestial King humphed coldly. Now that things had reached this point, he naturally understood the reason behind his wife's illness. He moved. Boom! The might of a Celestial King surged out. Even if there were 11 ascending origin tiers on Ji Xueming's side, so what? The difference between a Celestial King and an ascending origin tier was like the difference between an adult and an infant. No matter how big the advantage in numbers was, there was no way that the gap in strength between the two sides could be compensated. With the descent of a single palm strike, the 10 ascending origin tiers were all turned into pools of blood instantly, and Ji Xueming was apprehended. This unfilial disciple definitely could not be executed so easily. Ji Xueming trembled in fear. He was in despair, and his eyes were set on Ling Han. If it were not because of him, how could he have fallen to this? Ling Han shook his head. "Ask yourself this question first. Do you have the right to fault others? This person is..." The Azure Sun Celestial King looked towards Li Wan and Luo Xing. "His name is Ling Han, and we encountered him at the Cloudy Dream Marsh. Just now, it seemed like he was the one who helped me out of a crisis," Luo Xing said. He could not distinguish Ling Han's strength at all, and could only offer a vague description. "Oh?" The Azure Sun Celestial King paused slightly. "Friend, please join me on the mountain, and allow me to serve you some fragrant tea." Chapter 2507 Gifting a Mine. Chapter 2507 Gifting a Mine. Friend. Surprisingly, the Azure Sun Celestial King continued to refer to Ling Han as a friend. What did this signify? This signified that the Azure Sun Celestial King was willing to treat Ling Han as his equal, as someone with equivalent status to him. Who could enjoy a status equivalent to Celestial Kings? Naturally, only fellow Celestial Kings. Gasp! Luo Xing and Li Wan were both stunned upon realizing this. Even though they had already harbored suspicions, they were still given a huge fright when this was confirmed. They had actually brought a Celestial King back? However, this person didn't look like a Celestial King at all. Ling Han smiled faintly and replied, "All right. Please," the Azure Sun Celestial King said as he gestured in invitation. He then grabbed his two disciples and flew away first, appearing relaxed and elegant as his robes billowed in the wind. However, his speed was in fact astonishing as he soared toward the mountain. Meanwhile, Ling Han calmly ran beside the Azure Sun Celestial King, not falling behind a single inch. Upon seeing this, Luo Xing and the others finally dispelled all of their doubts. Ling Han was definitely a Celestial King. Otherwise, how could his speed match that of the Azure Sun Celestial King? In fact, even the Azure Sun Celestial King was slightly shocked. No matter how he looked, Ling Han was only at the hidden radiant stage. It was only because of Ling Han's shout just then that he had confirmed that he was at the Celestial King tier. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rushed over in astonishment. In any case, he truly couldn't make head nor tail of Ling Han's situation. Even as a Celestial King, he was still filled with confusion. After arriving atop the mountain, Li Wan retrieved the golden vein frog. This naturally delighted the Azure Sun Celestial King. This main medicine was truly far too difficult to obtain. Because of the cloudy dream marsh's peculiar environment, even the vision of Celestial Kings would be severely affected. As such, trying to find a golden vein frog there would be incredibly difficult. Moreover, he hadn't been able to leave, either, so he had no option but to send his disciples out. Unexpectedly, they actually managed to surprise him with success. The Azure Sun Celestial King took his leave first, impatiently rushing away to concoct the medicine to save his wife. When he finally finished, 3 days had already passed. When he returned to meet Ling Han, he wore an extremely exhausted expression. However, this still couldn't conceal his excitement. "Thank you so much, friend," the Azure Sun Celestial King said as he clasped his hands in gratitude. If it weren't for Ling Han, they would have definitely failed to obtain the golden vein frog. At the same time, it would have also been impossible to uncover that Ji Xueming was a traitor, and the duplicate Moon Sect might have truly suffered the terrible fate planned for them. It might have suddenly collapsed one day, and perhaps the Azure Sun Celestial King would have been able to flee, but his wife would definitely be killed. Thus, the Azure Sun Celestial King was extremely sincere when he expressed his gratitude. Ling Han calmly accepted his thanks, saying, "We can regard this as fate." The Azure Sun Celestial King naturally became even more moved. He talked about all matters under the sun with Ling Han, and this caused him to admire Ling Han even more. Ling Han also seized this opportunity to ask about the Heavenly Venerable tier. Even though the Azure Sun Celestial King's knowledge of this matter was limited, he at least still knew one important piece of information. That was, 1,000,000 years ago, Heavenly Venerate Zhou Heng had returned with numerous supreme prodigies, placing all of them in the world's paramount martial academy. This had caused a huge stir. World's paramount. Ling Han repeated this in his mind, and he couldn't help but chuckle. With the Flaming Frost realm being a super high-level dimension, and with so many heavenly venerates working together, this academy indeed had the right to be named as the world's paramount. Zhou Heng had said that it wasn't only him bringing prodigies to the academy. Several other heavenly venerates would also be bringing monarch tiers and monarch stars over from the various dimensions, nurturing them in the hopes of producing more heavenly venerates. Thus, the world's paramount martial academy would definitely be brimming with supreme talents. Would there be freaks with an evolution index of 12? Most definitely. Ling Han's fighting spirit was instantly ignited. In fact, he was itching to immediately rush over to the world's paramount martial academy to spar with all of those prodigies. Ling Han asked for more detail about the world's paramount martial academy, Yet the Azure Sun Celestial King didn't know much about this topic. Ling Han was slightly disappointed upon learning this. Forget about it, he would worry about this when he went to the academy. In any case, it was inevitable that he would go. When they parted, the Azure Sun Celestial King directly gifted a mine to Ling Han in order to express his gratitude. Several days later, Ling Han appeared in this mine. "Hell, what a sly person this Azure Sun Celestial King is," Ling Han said with a smile and a shake of his head. This was the mine that the Red Flower Sect and the Duplicate Moon Sect had been fighting over this entire time. In reality, it was still unclear who owned this mine. On one day, the Red Flower Sect might push the Duplicate Moon Sect away, and on another day, the opposite might happen. Thus, neither sect was able to mine this area. Now that the Azure Sun Celestial King had gifted this mine to Ling Han, his act of seeming generosity was actually accompanied by this troublesome baggage as well. From another perspective, the Azure Sun Celestial King was also greatly disheartened. In his fight for this mine, he had come extremely close to losing his wife. This allowed him to reach a realization. There was no need to care so much about some external matter. However, he was also unwilling to surrender this mine to the Red Flower Sect for no reason. Thus, gifting it to Ling Han was naturally the best course of action. "He's also managed to transfer this trouble to me," Ling Han murmured. If the Red Flower Sect discovered his presence in the mines, they would definitely send people over to stop him. Thus, unless Ling Han was willing to abandon the mine, it was inevitable that they would clash. In any case, it was possible that divine metal existed in this mine. Even if this was only a possibility, Ling Han was still determined to explore it. He was in desperate need of divine metal. He needed to forge his own heavenly venerate tool. Ling Han continued to mull over other issues as he walked toward the mine. He definitely had to eliminate Heavenborn. However, a sliver of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's imprint most likely existed inside Heavenborn, so would it be possible to destroy the latter's soul and allow the karmic life Heavenly Venerable to take over? If this were possible, wouldn't the karmic life Heavenly Venerable be reborn? With the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's prodigious talent, and with Heavenborn's incredible physique, just what kind of lofty height would he reach in the future? Ling Han was filled with eager anticipation upon thinking of this. He had never dreamed about being the lone hero in this world. Hysteria had reached the 7th tier of the Heavenly Venerable tier long ago, and it had more so transformed its own body into a dimension. Its strength was definitely paramount in the Genesis world. Slaying Hysteria by himself? That was simply impossible. Thus, the more 7th tier Heavenly Venerates there were, the better. After reaching a certain number, they could definitely rival Hysteria. When this number was surpassed, could they perhaps slay Hysteria and bring peace and tranquility back to the Genesis world? As long as Hysteria remained, the Genesis world would face the threat of being fully engulfed by it. At that time, everything would descend into desolation and destruction. Halt! Just as his mind was wandering, not paying attention to the surroundings, he suddenly heard the angry shout of someone. He looked up, only to see a mountain face before him. There were camps to their side, yet one of them was already empty. Meanwhile, the other camp was fervently constructing something. The person who had shouted at him was an ascending origin tier elite. He wore a gray hat, and his eyes were filled with sharpness and ferocity. It was clear that the Duplicate Moon Sect had already retreated. Right now, the Red Flower Sect was preparing to open this mine. Ling Han smiled and said, "The Azure Sun Celestial King has already gifted this mine to me. You guys don't need to worry about me either. I'll leave after having a look around." He naturally couldn't care less about ordinary ore. He only needed divine metal. "Ha ha! What an absolute fool!" the man with the gray hat said with loud laughter. Swoosh! He dashed forward and viciously thrust forth his spear, causing the wind to whistle. Even though Ling Han only appeared to be at the hidden radiance stage, this man was an extremely careful person. Thus, he had attacked with his full strength, afraid that Ling Han had cultivated some technique that allowed him to conceal his true cultivation level. After all, the Duplicate Moon Sect's sudden retreat was far too unreasonable. Thus, It was only natural that he acted with extreme caution. Ling Han simply ignored him as he continued to stride forward. Pun! The spear struck him, yet an even more terrifying power reverberated, causing the spear to instantly shoot back. The butt of the spear was blunt, yet it ruthlessly pierced through the heart of the man with the gray hat with a plop. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.